areas in KwaZulu-Natal. And some monies in the municipal infrastructure grant has also been reprioritized. It indicates the names of the municipalities, the amounts, and also for what purpose. If we can then go to the next slide. It's also another initiative that particularly was implemented by the Department of Human Settlements, which is also quite important. What they've done is immediately after the disaster struck, is asked to make existing monies in the system available earlier than what it would have been made available. So it was released before its payment date. The payment date was changed to release the money earlier. Those monies were then repurposed to specifically respond to the housing needs in the country to respond to the disaster. That was a quite important initiative that the Department of Human Settlements did. And then we also did an environment where money was shifted from the Small Enterprise Development Agency to the Finance Agency, specifically to make available for flood relief for small businesses that were adversely impacted by the disaster. Then a bit of a challenge that we sit with, and hopefully it will not be a challenge for a long time. In terms of legislation, the Division of Revenue Bill needs to be enacted, and the Appropriation Bill needs to be enacted for us to release 100% of the allocations available for the 22 financial year. And currently, the Division of Revenue Act has been enacted, but we're still waiting for the Appropriation Bill to be enacted. And as soon as that is approved, the monies will be fully released. This just indicates the money that's been made available to KZN. They've received quite a bit of money directly from donations. We're still waiting for money from international donor funding. There's indications that money will be made available, but to date, it's just indications so far. Next slide. What this slide indicates is just the process, and the minister's already pointed it out. With regard to the immediate response, the slides that I just presented dealt with this. What this slide indicates is that the longer-term rehabilitation cost is either dealt with in the adjustments budget, through the contingency reserve is necessary, and also the normal budget process. So what is important is that we get the applications from the national departments concerned. It will be also verified by the NDMC, and then it's formally submitted into the budget process. What the next slide indicates, and it was also brought into place because concerns were raised that quite a bit of money can be released for the floods, and it's important that we monitor those monies quite appropriately. So what National Treasury has done, we've implemented a number of monitoring systems. We're monitoring the expenditure of national departments, provinces, and municipalities. So we specifically created new lines in the budgeting system that they report on the monies that they make available as well as the expenditure. We've also introduced a procurement system where national departments, provinces, and municipalities are also required to report on the procurement that they've done, who they've given the contracts to, the size of the procurement, and also for what purpose. That information we give through regularly to the Office of the Accountant General, and they use that type of information to do rapid audits. If you can look at the right-hand column, it's not that clear to see, but one thing that we've picked up so far, that a lot of orders have been put in place so far. But if you look at the expenditure trends, it's much, much less than the actual orders. Hopefully over time that will be fixed as well, or otherwise it means that orders are not implemented or not being paid. Next slide. And this is just indicating that there's quite a number of structures that's been put in place to ensure alignment, that we talk to each other, that we work with each other, and it just indicates what National Treasury is doing and how we're coordinating with others as well. Thank you very much.
Honorable Minister, if there's anything besides the presentation, or we are fine. Honorable Kungubel.
Thank you very much, Ms. Fano. I think that's how far it goes, Honorable Chair. We want to make this point that in a number of areas, even the money that has already been released, when you do comparison, the expenditure is behind that which has been already given. And we were convened by the Premier, and a lot of clarifications on these matters were made. But if there were still outstanding things, the Honorable Premier is free to express that. And we actually appreciated that meeting before even coming here. We'll await questions now. We are done, Wendy? Yes. Thank you, Honorable Chair.
Colleagues, the plan was to take all the presentations, but after consulting my co-chair and the role that has been played by Treasury, and since we have started, so for us to be able to do justice and assist the process, it will be in order for us to engage the presentation now. Let me recognize hands. Or the premiers that are here, MSc representing Premier of Eastern Cape, before I can recognize members of the ad hoc committee, if there are some issues that you want to raise in terms of the presentation so that we have a better understanding. Premier Zigalala.
No, thanks. Greetings to you, Honorable Chair, Honorable Co-Chairs, Honorable members of the ad hoc committee, the ministers and deputy ministers and all colleagues. I think there are a few issues that I would like to raise on the presentation. I think firstly, we do need to take the people of South Africa into confidence. Maybe finance, the Minister of Finance would need to consider issuing a statement around the issue of 1 billion, because that clarity is not in the public as the commitment of 1 billion was made. So I think the Minister would need to issue that public statement. The second issue, which in particular affect eThekwini municipality, is this issue of insured properties or assets. It takes time for for insurers to come into the party and to assist. Now, the council have made a request for Treasury either to advance them and then get that money later when the insurance pays. So we would like to get that point. If not, try to engage with these financial institutions to expedite the process, because we believe that through the National Treasury, we can have a process that will be shorter to ensure that we meet the expectations. I do take the point of saying the allocation and the expenditure. The expenditure is not yet at that point. I would want to contest that, because right now, if you talk about expenditure, let's take one side, humanitarian support. People are not having enough meals. As the province, we've taken a view that whatever we get should go to assist the Department of Social Development. Whatever we get, we've even said the Treasury from the province must go and look for funds to support those families that are in community shelters. Now, we are also working against time to get land and build temporary residential units for people. So to suggest that the expenditure is behind and low, I wouldn't agree with that. Then there is this issue of donor funds. I think that issue needs to be clarified, because The presentation make a general assumption that there is a donation, there are donations that have been given. They need to present here from where and how much. Maybe let me assist. We have received about 3.5, if not 3.6. The first was 100,000, which was a private donor, specified these 100,000 must go straight to health services. 3 million was the second donation that came. That came from the gaming and betting industry. They said this must go straight to education. 500,000 came from Qatar government. They said, go and look on humanitarian support. And we have said that 500,000 must go to social development to support them. This week, we have received a pledge from African Bank saying they will give about 3.2 million. They have not given. It's a commitment. So we can account on this. But they are saying there are funds that have been donated. Now they need to give us the breakdown. Who gave money, on what project, to who, because we have not received those funds. So we are able to account on these that I'm mentioning, because they have been donated to us as government, and all of those donors have paid direct to the provincial account. So it will help us also to get the breakdown of those donations so that we will know. I would say also, as I raised it when we met last time, there are a number of donations that have been pledged, but not given to government. And we can't be held accountable for that. I said, USAID wrote a letter to us and said they've given some donation, and that money they will transfer to Solidarity Fund. But up until today, Solidarity Fund has not been with us. They've not contacted us to say, we received this amount meant to support KZN, and we're going to do 1, 2, 3. They've not. Now, I raised a point, and I've raised it with you. I also raised it with the Human Rights Commission and requested that they assist us to get all of these NGOs and coordinate those NGOs so that the funding is streamlined with the expected delivery and the departments that are relevant. Now, to come and say there is this funding, but don't give us details, will be a problem. I think for now, that will be my contribution. I'd want to end by saying the huge damage that was in eThekwini will not be able to be fixed if we take this approach of not supporting assets that are insured. Because insurances, by their nature, they would want to conduct their own processes. We're not saying fund that allocation, but you can advance. We say to Treasury, let them advance eThekwini, and then when that money is available, we can then take it back, even if it will go from the insurer straight to Treasury. What we need is to just fix the assets that were damaged. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Premier Zigalala. Premier Map, we are fine. MEC, Ngaba, we are fine. Colleagues, Honorable Hliangwa will be number 1.
It's on a point of, I want to say point of order, because if I may crave your indulgence momentarily, Chairperson.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Chairpersons, honorable colleagues, members of the executive, the premiers and MECs and the officials and technical teams. Chair, I don't know, arising out of what the Premier of KwaZulu-Natal has said, I will use the word reservedly, in engaging with the National Treasury report. I think it may be beneficial, Chair, that we get all the presentations. I get a sense the issues are cross-cutting, and we will engage National Treasury only to go back to an issue that will arise at a later stage. Maybe it will be to our benefit to get a global picture of who's who and what's what and where's where, and then move on from that basis. I get a sense we will engage on COCTA matters and funds them and all sorts of things. When COCTA is presenting, there's issues. I'm just making an example. So I was just craving your indulgence, Chairperson, and in no means challenging the direction you had given, but it may be helpful to us to be able to just get a global picture first of all the presentation. Thank you, Chair.
It's in order. As long as colleagues, you are able to note everything so that once we get to that part of deliberations, we are going to be able to do justice. It will be Minister of Public Works and Infrastructure. Okay. Sorry, Honorable Tilil. Let me go to Minister Kungubele.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Whilst we are invited, we will follow the guide. Whilst one takes into account what Honorable Shlang was saying, in my situation, I had made an apology that my next meeting is 1 o'clock at the airport. We're dealing with something else there. So my fear is that I might leave before we make responses where it is necessary. How you manage that, we are in your hands.
No, what we'll do is that we'll take the presentations quickly, and we're mindful that before we can get to that 1 o'clock, we'll be able to allow you the opportunity to respond. Honorable Minister Tilil.
Thank you and good morning, Honorable Chairpersons, Honorable Premiers, Honorable Members of Parliament, the officials. Yes, we have submitted our presentation already, and we will just do some highlights in the presentation if that can assist you. I will ask our Deputy Director General for Facility Management, Mr. Lombard, to just do a quick presentation for us. Thank you.
Mr. Lombard. But I hope by now, Nola, we have assisted our colleagues from the provinces to have all the presentations. Okay, no, that's fine. Even if the screen might be gone, but all of us, we do have the presentation. Mr. Lombard.
Good morning, Honorable Chairs, Ministers, Deputy Ministers, Premiers, MECs, it seems to me I have to stand up, and other dignitaries. I'm going to take you briefly through the report. Honorable Minister of Public Works and Deputy Minister, as we've agreed, I will focus on the highlights of what the Public Works Department and Infrastructure has done to respond to the disaster in the KZN and the Eastern Cape. The first slide basically is just the background, and I think it's to be noted that our response was against the announcement of the President in terms of how government would deal with the disaster. Basically in terms of immediate humanitarian relief, stabilization and recovery, as well as reconstruction and rebuilding. This process was followed by and spearheaded by our Minister and Deputy Minister, linking up with the Minister of Human Settlements, as well as the MEC of Public Works and Human Settlements in the province. Collaboration has happened between us and a number of departments to address the issues at hand, as per the first slide, which is still on the background. And in an attempt to respond, I don't see the presentation, Chairperson. Can I just hold my talk a bit?
Can we have the people that are assisting to fly to the presentation? What is the problem?
And Chairperson, can I also request them not to leave their workstation? When a presentation is completed, it doesn't mean you must go out and do something else. You stay there for the duration of the presentations.
Thank you, Chairperson. I'll proceed. I've just been notified, and which is clear, that the presentation is available to the House. Even if it's not flighted, let me move along in the interest of time. So on the second slide, Chairperson and the House, Public Works have identified a number of own state-owned buildings that have been damaged. We have responded through our regions in order to address these, so that the departments that we are housing in those buildings and those assets could immediately again perform their works. We've identified land parcels for resettlement. We have undertaken scientific research. Goodness, Chairperson, I've got competition here. However, let me continue. We've undertaken research in terms of our land parcels, where they are situated in terms of floodlines, all of that which is important for the future response of any department, in fact, going forward, so that we never have the situation that we've been faced with again. In terms of the department, in partnership with the Department of Defense, we are also rolling out work on a number of bridges that I will showcase in a slide to come, as you've seen. And with respect to specifically the KZN, it's 23 bridges that are planned for construction and 18 bridges in the Eastern Cape. What we've done in terms of our response is we've addressed the work that we had focused on through a number of work streams. When we visited the area with the Minister and the DM and provincial dignitaries in the middle of April, we realized that we had to focus on the very first project, basically, which was the Durban Air Force Base. Reason being is that the SANDF was housing equipment there that needed to be responsive to the disaster. That slide number 6 basically just explains that we've moved in terms of the emergency response very swiftly, and at this time we've performed 14 services, and we've completed the work at the 98% level. Detail of those services are in slides 7 and 8. And then just from the photo, in the showcase of the photo slide 9, the before and after, you could see how that hangar looks. We looked at the time when we visited the site. It was mud all over the place. You can see the water levels in those buildings, and then what it looks like after the emergency response. In terms of public works assets, we immediately had to look at restoring services for departments that have been housed in those assets. The slide 11 just gives a detail of the responses per department. It is also needed to know by the committee and the members present today, as well as dignitaries, that some of the works would be going beyond emergency work, and it would be typical construction projects which will follow a different procurement process. The same was done for the Eastern Cape, which is captured in slide 13. There's also a reference in both of the slides of the value of the work that we've done as part of the emergency measures, as well as the probability in terms of works to be done following the proper construction processes later. I think what is very important to be noted, Chairpersons, is the work that we've done on land parcels and resettlement. We're very much aware of the fact that people have lost their livelihoods and needs to be resettled. I'm supported here this morning by 2 DDGs that will be dealing with this in question time. On my left is DDG Suban, and on my right, in his absence, he's assisting there. Thanks, DDG Kubeka, which will talk to, amongst other, the land parcels and the resettlement issues, which is a critical issue, as well as specifically the bridges. Slide 16 details the land parcels that have been identified for resettlement. Slide 17 talks about remainder of land parcels that are available that we are looking into. And then slide 18 specifically deals with the 5 land parcels that have been confirmed provisionally to be used for resettlement purposes. Slide 19 just gives a very well-known map of the KZN area. If we then go to slide 21, what the Minister and the DM has also taken as an approach is to make available professionals from the entities that are under the Minister's jurisdiction and the DM's jurisdiction. So through the CBE, we made available 304, or we cited 304 built environment professionals that have been listed and made available as resources to address issues related to scope assessments, putting together bill of quantities and professional reports to address projects in terms of the emergency. This list has been made available to COCTA in the province, and on the right-hand side of that slide, you will see a number of resources from the department itself that has been cited and been working on our own assets in order to get the work done. And that is why we can report this morning on most of our projects in the KZN. We are around 95% completion of the emergency work, and we are a bit behind on the Eastern Cape province, but going there very swiftly. The bridges is quite an important project process that have unfolded. I won't talk to the detail of that, but I will give, if there are questions on that, we will deal with that later in question time. But if I can take you to the question, which is heading 4 bridges KZN, those are the 23 bridges that are going to go into repair and construction. The latest information is our teams, our public works teams and SANDF teams would be on the ground in next week. DDG Quebec are starting with this work, which is critical to the infrastructure of the province, especially getting learners to access schools and obviously communities as well. On slide 25, there's the same that deals with the Eastern Cape, and more importantly, slide 26 indicates the bridges that have been identified in the Eastern Cape to follow the same process. What is very important to note is the work that has been undertaken by Infrastructure South Africa under the directive of the Minister. And in terms of the purpose, let me just share what the important items that I'd like to bring forward pertaining to Infrastructure South Africa, or ISA. I think the first thing in terms of the purpose is the intention was setting up a technology-based system to better report current impacted areas and provide an proactive measure information reporting for future disasters in South Africa. In terms of this approach, the intention is to get a single view on the disaster management impact, and then to follow it up through ISA's proactive system to achieve the following key objectives. That's on slide 28, chairpersons: coordinated response, quality of data, continuous and future monitoring, and a single view of information reporting. The initiatives include the engagement of impacted stakeholders and different data sources as part of the setup. If we then go to slide 29 in terms of the strategic content, it is important to note that the overall context is the ability to ingest various data sources using the CIR system called CMOR as a core platform for data collection. This will provide critical input in terms of the presidential war room, and Infrastructure South Africa is currently pioneering the presidential war room approach. It is geared towards harnessing the power of technology and data and information sharing that will direct decision-making and collaboration. Lastly, the key objectives from the strategic context are to give the President and Ministers a single integrated view of infrastructure and disaster-related projects in South Africa. Slide 30 deals with the key areas of scoping and collaboration. Let us just note that the reports is intended to follow information across all sectors at 3 levels: project-related information, disaster-impacted information, and planning and research information. In using the CMOR system, the CMOR system, the platform has been put together to collect information, sources, and creating a single view dashboard. This single view dashboard will be housed within the presidential war room. ISA started the engagement with the KZN's Office of the Premier to initiate data sets for reporting purposes. And the first phase of the project is to capitalize on the current work that has already been done. The engagement also commits other stakeholders to the process. I've mentioned the CSIR, the Geoscience Council, the Weather Services, SANSA, ESRI, KZN COCTA, and the Office of the Premier. Slide 31 just denotes key notes and timelines. The ISA team has been aligned with both KZN stakeholders and vital data sources and entities to ensure that we have both buy-in and quality of data. The project will continue engaging with the impacted stakeholders to ensure that there's no duplication of effort in terms of the system and the process. The expected target date of the PVR is November 22. In terms of stakeholder engagement on the floods in general, the Public Works team generates weekly reports, which is signed off by the ministry. The DPI reports are shared with the National Disaster Nerve Center and KZN Provincial Disaster Joint Committee. The Auditor General has started a real-time audit on the work that we're doing, and the reports have been shared with AXA as well as the DPI Internal Audit Committee and Audit Committee. It is recommended, chairpersons, that the ad hoc joint committee notes progress on the public works and infrastructure disaster intervention in KZN and the Eastern Cape province following the floods. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Lombard. Minister, are you fine with everything? Thank you, Minister Tilil. The next presentation will be from Deputy Minister Nkadimeng, Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs.
Thank you very much, Co-Chair Nyambi, and greetings to Co-Chair Frolip as well. Honorable members of the joint committees, my colleagues from the executive, premiers, MECs present, and the technical staff. I wouldn't take long in the interest of time. Suffice to say, Chair, that our role as COCTA mainly is institutional arrangements, coordination of technical teams, technical support in line with the MISA, for example, under such circumstances, mobilization of resources, and preparation assisting municipalities with paperwork to ensure that we meet the requirements of what we need to benefit, and the details that will be presented by our acting head of the National Disaster Management Center, Ma'am Ann Brower, is a coordination of reports that have been built up from all the spheres, that is national and provincial and municipalities themselves, in putting up a response after the minister has declared, in line with Section 23 and Section 27 of the National Disaster Management Act of South Africa, to coordinate the floods of April and May. With your permission, Chair, honorable members, allow me to request the acting head of the National Disaster Management Center, May Ann, to take us through the presentation as it's flighted from Cooperative Governance, DCOG. Thank you very much.
Good morning, and thank you very much. I will proceed with the presentation. So basically, the purpose of the presentation is to provide a progress report on the national state of disaster in terms of flood response and recovery interventions. And we will basically focus on a few areas regarding the coordination of response efforts, the effects of the floods in the affected provinces, immediate humanitarian relief, some progress on the temporary residential units, stabilization and recovery, as well as infrastructure interventions and communication, and also briefly look at the summary of funding allocations. As Deputy Minister Nkadimeng indicated, The disaster has been classified and later declared as a national state of disaster as it affected more than one province. And that was in terms of the National Disaster Management Act. So it provides us with the enabling legislation to deal with some aspects of this disaster. Government also adopted a three-pronged approach to better coordinate the response, recovery, and reconstruction measures. And that was also announced by the President to look at immediate humanitarian relief first, then at stabilization and recovery, and then the third phase is then the longer-term rehabilitation and reconstruction. In terms of the coordination efforts from the Department of Cooperative Governments and specifically the National Disaster Management Center, we continue to coordinate response and recovery efforts by all stakeholders as per the mandate in terms of the legislation. So the coordination efforts is through the establishment and facilitation of structures, then also the technical support to municipalities through the Municipal Infrastructure Support Agent, MISA, where they have conducted a comprehensive damage assessment in KZN and identified priority projects requiring urgent attention within the municipalities. The assessments reported by MISA are utilized to guide decision-making in funding requests by municipalities. Then in terms of the mobilization of resources, it's also to address the damages from all the available avenues within government. And that is done in consultation with National Treasury, as was indicated in the earlier presentation. This slide basically just indicates the integrated institutional arrangements that have been set up. And there are various task teams that provide weekly reports to the National Disaster Management Center, being task teams responsible for humanitarian relief, for infrastructure, and various others. That structure is also duplicated similarly in the province, specifically in KZN, so that there is integration and coordination taking place across the various teams. This slide basically gives a summary of the effects of the floods in the various provinces, and you can see there that 4 provinces were affected, but whereas KZN was the most severely impacted. I think you know the figures by now, so I will not go into the detail of that. In KZN, there's still 99 shelters where people are accommodated and service provision takes place at the shelters. And there's also been burial support to affected families. In the Eastern Cape province, assessments by social workers are continuing until all affected families have been assessed. And there's also support from donor agencies. And they will also be brought on board as we go along. In Northwest, there were shelters, but all the evacuees that were accommodated have gone back to their respective homes. If we look at short-term interventions in relation to the shelters or the mass care centers that are already linked to land, that will also benefit families. There is a breakdown of the different municipalities, and in Ugu, the potential number of families that will be accommodated is 16. In Kwadukuza is 215, and in eThekwini is 3,385, and Umgungluvu is 6. So this process is also to ensure that the land is linked to the shelters. This slide gives a summary of the temporary residential units that has already been completed, and that is a number of 385, specifically in the KZN province. An amount of more than 9 million has been paid to service providers already, and invoices amounting to more than 4 million are being processed for construction of DRUs. In terms of human settlements, there has been applications for financial assistance, and the National Treasury presentation also alluded to that. So I'm not going to dwell into that. There's also various avenues that have been identified to support human settlements. And there's also emergency housing grants that were accessed by the department. The Development Bank of South Africa also provided support, and applications were submitted by the KZN COCTA on behalf of the human settlements and municipalities, and approval has been granted for the delivery of 200 permanent homes in the various municipalities as indicated there in KZN. If we move on to the progress made in terms of basic education infrastructure, there has been assessments of all the damaged schools, and after some of the schools that were removed in terms of damages or lack of maintenance before the floods, there's still a number of 356 schools that will be that will need to be repaired, and the Department of Basic Education has actually categorized it into category A, B, and C, where A is short-term, and the projects will be completed by the 31st of August, whereas category B is 117 projects estimated at 29 million, and the implementation will be completed by 31 December. And then the longer-term projects is category C, where 198 projects estimated at an amount of in excess of 210 million will be completed by the end of the financial year, which is 31 March 2023. If we look at the stabilization and recovery phase, this is just a summary of the progress with regards to water supply, and specifically in eThekwini, and there has been progress in the various regions. In the inner west region, it's about 90% complete. In the outer west region, it improved from 45 to 80%. In the central region, it improved from 45% to 70%. In the south region, it is at 85%. And also in the north region, it's about 85% complete. If we further look at progress with regards to water infrastructure in eThekwini, so most of the water services have been restored, but unfortunately sanitation services is a little bit behind, and it was further set back by the storm that was experienced during May, and particularly that affected the wastewater works. So the other issue with regards to this matter is the insurance cover that needs to be resolved to address some of these infrastructure facilities, as also indicated by the previous speaker. In terms of transport infrastructure, there's also been progress reported in terms of the restoration of roads in the various municipalities, eThekwini, King Cetshwayo, Harigwala, and Umzinyathi, and also Umgungundlovu. So there's also a few pictures that indicates the before and after, how they are progressing with the work. This slide also speaks to the strategic and state infrastructure. I think the previous speaker alluded to that, about the emergency repairs for DPWI facilities, where KZN has 47 projects at 75% completion, Eastern Cape 11 projects at about 50% completion. Also, the emergency repairs at Air Force Base, the Bailey Bridges, and then the progress with regards to Bayhead Road repair works. Phase 1 and 2 is completed, but phase 3 is a longer-term solution, which includes the reinstatement of the road, the redesign and construction of the canal bridge to accommodate extreme flooding. And that will take about 18 months. The next slide talks to the Department of Transport. They suffered infrastructure damages as the result of the floods, amounting to 5.8 billion. Reprioritization exercise was conducted, and they did identify projects that are in various stages for the current financial year for implementation. There are 730 projects that are prioritized, and an amount of 2.9 billion available for reprioritization. If we look at Northwest Province, there has also been some progress with short-term interventions and medium-term interventions, which the department will continue to provide support. And in addition, with regards to long-term interventions, the department is implementing multi-year road infrastructure projects in and around Swaying local municipality, and some of them include special maintenance of roads in various areas, approximately 28 kilometers and 16 kilometers respectively. If we move on to economic recovery interventions, the economic flood rebuilding support packages was made available by the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, as well as the Industrial Development Corporation. So there's a working capital grant of 100 million, infrastructure support grant, where 50% cost sharing grant funding is available to SMEs and large businesses affected by the floods for the purpose of reconstruction of physical and bulk infrastructure inside the premises. There's also an industrial loan component where companies are assisted who are not covered by insurance or faced with an insurance shortfall. And this includes a bridging facility for fully insured companies. There's also a trader relief funds made available by Department of Small Business Development and SEDA, where there's informal trader relief fund of 10 million and a formal trader relief fund of 50 million. The destination marketing has also allocated 2 million for all affected districts in KZN, and that is within the Department of Tourism. So if we look at the progress on the ground, this slide just provides a summary of the breakdown of applications that have been received. There's a number of 457 applications received. The majority of that is from KZN, 89%, and the remainder is from Eastern Cape. So the total value of applications received is 224 million, of which just over 200 million are projects from KZN. It must also be noted that over half of the applications are women-owned businesses, and a third is youth-owned. The next slide just gives us progress with support to businesses and the application stages. So a number of 148 applications have been assessed. 72 were processed for approval. 19 were declined, and number of applications were uploaded for the National Office to approve is 53. In terms of support to businesses, there's also been a number of 26 applications that have already been approved, which amounts to in excess of 8 million rand. Some have been returned to the province, and some of the total value of applications that have been returned to the province for review is more than 7 million. So just to indicate some of the reasons for applications being returned to the province is that the review of the flood impact assessment needs more robust due diligence, and items requested are outside of the program guidelines, and often additional documentation is also required. So with regards to support to traders, Formal Trader Relief Fund has an allocated amount of 50 million, of which 8.2 million is already committed. And that will go to 72 SMEs within the districts as mentioned in KZN. This slide just gives an overview of the government communications focus, re-emphasizing government's measures on assisting flood-affected areas through the Disaster Management Act, profiling ministerial and departmental visits on assessments of the damages caused by the floods, and educating the public on climate change and its effects. So this is just a few photos that has also been provided and shared on various platforms. This graph just gives an indication of the sentiments that are in the media with regards to the flooding and the key issues that are mentioned. And one can see that there is a more neutral trend that is occurring this week with regards to the issues around floods. This slide is basically supporting the information that was already provided by the National Treasury. Just to indicate, the first two lines is the municipal infrastructure grant and the municipal infrastructure grant reprioritization that has taken place within the Department of Cooperative Governance, 42 million for KZN and 77 million for Eastern Cape, and then various funding sources within human settlements, and then the two rows that are highlighted in yellow, in green again, is the disaster grants for emergencies, and where 87.3 has already been paid over to municipalities, and the second phase of 123.9 is in process of being finalized. Then the emergency housing grants are also alluded to there, and then also funds that are available in other commitments in terms of goods and services, as reported by National Treasury, variants that have taken place, and also within the Department of Transport for Bailey Bridges. So if you calculate all of that, a total amount of 6.7 billion has already been allocated to deal with the disaster. But it includes 480 million that has been reported as insured infrastructure, which is still not resolved. This slide provides the information that Treasury also provided in terms of how they monitor the procurement. And as of 28 June, the value of of the total orders was in excess of 3.7 billion. But it also indicates how many suppliers have been appointed and service providers, and how many organizations or organs of state have actually already submitted orders. So I think that brings us to the recommendation just to take note on the progress report on the flood response and recovery interventions in relation to the national state of disaster, and also noting that the detailed reports are provided by the sector departments as we have seen thus far. Thank you.
Thank you. The next presentation will be from the Honorable Deputy Minister of Human Settlement, Honorable Tswete.
Thank you very much, Chair. Honorable Chairpersons, Honorable Floric and Honorable Nyambi, the Ministers and Deputy Ministers, the Premiers, the MECs, Honorable Members, DGs and HODs.
DM, have the mic closer.
Oh. I'm so sorry. No, let me start afresh. Thank you very much, Chair. Honorable Chairpersons, Honorable Nyambi, Honorable Floric, Ministers and Deputy Ministers, Premiers, MECs, Honorable Members, the DGs and HODs. I'm supported by DDG Sokopo, Honorable Member, but our role as national is to make sure that there's money given to provinces to make sure that there are shelters built for the communities. As Wendy said at the beginning, that we made the point that as human settlements, upfront we gave provinces funding to build the shelters for our people. And one thing that I know as a challenge that we encountered from all provinces. The first one that I must talk to is the Deliberations Northwest. I'm talking about 3 provinces because I was there myself. The problem of wetland is a problem in Northwest, but I'm glad that the Premier is there. He'll elaborate more. And again, in KZN, and to my understanding, there is no problem so far in terms of the funding. They do have the funding to do to build shelters. And in the Eastern Cape, yes, we gave them money. The Premier or MEC is here. We will attest to that. We have no problem of funding in the human settlements. We gave them money to build the houses. And I'm now going to hand over to the DG Sokopo to take us through. Thank you very much.
DG, take us through. Roving mic to DG Sokopo.
I couldn't believe it, Chair. I was told that then she's on the way, but I have an alternative, Chair, if they are here, both of them, the DG and DDG. I don't know why they're not here, but I've planned last night, I was with my team and HOD from we tried to consolidate our slides and our presentation. I'm going to request in the meantime, because we can't wait for somebody who is not here at the moment. I'm going to request the DG, the HOD from KZN and HOD. Our presentation is very short, don't panic. Can I ask the HOD or KZN to do the presentation? After that, it's gonna be Eastern Cape, and after that is gonna—
Can you have that mic that side? The
and
HOD
after
from
that—
KZN, it's on my right.
Yes, and then after that is gonna be Eastern Cape. Thank you very much.
Honorable MECCBI is confirming that they do have the money. Can we have another? Yeah, let's have that mic that is working to
It's better, Chair.
MECCBI. Okay,
I
it's
think
fine.
it's working. No, thanks, Chair. Greetings to you, Chair and the co-chair, the ministers and deputy ministers, also all the members who are here, MECs as well, and all the colleagues. No, Chair, I'm not. We've got a mic. I was just alerting the HOD while I comment before the presentation. What the DM has said, it's well and fine, but I was just making the HOD aware that whatever that he presents, it's not the presentation that we'll be presenting later on. It must be the presentation that was consolidated with the national team, not the provincial presentation, so that we are not caught wanting later on. Thank you, Chair.
That's fine. HOD, can you have the roving mic? Make sure you don't confuse the presentations for today.
Yes, greetings, chairs, honorable premiers, honorable members, colleagues. Yeah. Are we not flighting? Okay. Okay. No, here obviously we'll just go straight to the contents. As human settlements, the main programs that we, especially under emergency, we've got. Oh yes, stand up. Okay. You know, being told sometimes. Yeah. I was hoping that it will also be flighted so we can just move with speed. In terms of the tools utilized during disaster relief and recovery.
HOD?
Yes.
I might be the only one who knows you very well. So
Oh, yeah,
it will be in order to
apologies.
introduce yourself for the others.
Yes, apologies, honorable members. It's Mdu Zungu, KZN Human Settlements, HOD. Is that obviously with my seniors around today? Yeah, I'm just going to highlight the tools that we use under the Human Settlements grants, especially for emergency, for other members. We've got the emergency housing program. I think obvious treasurer was highlighting that under normal circumstances, that's a grant that we normally use, which is obviously budgeted in our HSDG for those kind of interventions. At a municipal level as well, there's that one covering province and municipalities. And then the framework, obvious, when expediting responses for repairs of housing units damaged during natural disasters. We've got that framework. And then we've got the standard operating procedure that we have in terms of our emergency housing program policy. And there's monitoring and reporting, obviously, that we have as part of our normal processes. Approach of addressing this disaster is that it has been explained as well that we normally reprioritize our budgets by taking money that is already on the existing budget, that like we did in April, that we had to utilize the money that we have instead of waiting for the money of disaster, because normally every disaster funding takes about 18 months to come through. So what we have normally done now and learned in the past is that it's always good to just reprioritize your budget. What it means that you take the later part of the year funding in projects that are already in your business plan and put it forward in terms of you to allow that you continue the normal projects while you also have the disaster. So later in the year, that's when we do the reprioritization of having to go and request for those monies when they do come through. And then you just simply adjust in terms of your adjustment budgets like we normally do when we have gone to Parliament. Implementation support is that we normally, even currently, we've got a joint operating coordinating committee that is at national, provincial, as part of accountability for us to really be able to have work streams. Because the most important part is that all of these work streams have got to be there, which is finance, governance, and also the one that deal with the normal programs on the ground. And in that way, we are able to align our systems in terms of both entities. It can be NHBRC, HDA, as it was also highlighted here, because that's why we're able to go through to public works with speed to say we request these kind of properties. And we're glad to see all of those properties now that are highlighted in terms of the requests that we've done. So, and obviously we are indicating that Northwest has also started with its JOG, despite adverse to do, has not started. So that's what National is also indicating, that it will be much more prudent for them to have that one, because it does assist for us to talk in terms of coordination. There's ongoing continuous monitoring and oversight of these programs. It is with regard to real-time audit, currently, that's because it's quite new that this time around we've got the internal auditors, both from provincial audits and also from AG, who are also conducting ongoing oversight. These are general, DM has already highlighted this one of saying getting proper land, and obviously in order to accommodate those that are in the community care centers because of the vast numbers of areas that were affected. So in other words, we have to conduct proper assessments of those pieces of land before we can do anything. There's elements of business forums that were also highlighted, even when NCP did visit the areas, and community acceptance of the temporary residential areas. This can be also in other communities. The beneficiary lists that are being interfered by councillors, because this is very common even now, where you go into the area, you find that definitely there's also that interference of some of those lists. As such, when you go to the ground, you find that the house that was supposed to have been documented on the disaster is not there. And then we need to really accommodate them now when you're on the ground, because you go there, you find this house was not documented, but the others were documented. And definitely that's a complete anomaly find. And that can be an audit query, whereas you were correcting what was an abnormal situation on the ground. So in terms of this, we just highlight there in terms of the emergency house programs that is coming from the Housing Act of 107, 1997. And there's Part A and Part B that we are indicating in terms of directives. And also to say that this assistance includes possible relocation and resettlement of people on a voluntary and cooperative basis in those appropriate cases. So the grant framework, I think, has been explained. I don't have to just dwell much. I've just quote few areas to provide funding to provinces to repair damage to housing for low-income households following a disaster or housing emergency if the cost of repairs are less than the cost of relocation and provision of temporary shelters. So that's what we apply through and through. In other areas, obviously, there's provision of materials, as we've seen in certain areas. The costing of it has been highlighted as well in terms of the subsidy quantum, including the whole TRU. Issues that we are learning currently is that it's very important also in terms of services that we are also built into this, because the role that municipalities need to play in order to provide services to these areas is now becoming much more crucial. And we are really costing those issues going forward. Requirements for establishment of a TRU is that it's a prerequisite that a TRA is established and all pre-planning requirements are completed. In other words, for now, to avoid people just being moved as it was happening all in Dela, these are issues that we are putting forward to say it should really be a pre-permanent setup where a person doesn't have to be relocated all the time. So in other words, we build it up and upgrade as we are putting those issues there in terms of environmental planning, scoping, and also the issues. It's slide 10. Okay. So the contents of emergency grant application form, those are the issues that are there. The most important that I would really like to highlight is that one of community profile, because that's where you spend most of the time to verify beneficiaries. And in that case, we have to ensure that the one that is benefiting is not double dipping, because some of the community members, they do bypass the system and want to bypass it through by all means. And we find that he has already sold, and he was also on a rental area, but now wants to be now on a permanent. And you find that, no, definitely it's really owning a property somewhere. So it's always very crucial to really verify these issues before you do a proper intervention. So that's why we have also taken some of them to social housing areas to say, this one just wants to continue in terms of rental. So we have got to check with the social housing institute to say, this one wants to really continue to rent. So in that area, we've got to also ensure that they go towards the correct programs. So it's not only just all of them going to TRUs. There are also those that are permanent, that are waiting for a house. And there are projects that are running, and we found that definitely we need to continue running with the projects so they can go back to their own projects. So in that way, we are able to differentiate each and every person that is in that care center. I thought, let me just highlight those issues. Yeah, so this is in terms of the overview of the assessment from the various provinces, because this will be coming through in the various presentation from provinces as well. So I think I'm not going to repeat, Chair, because I can see the one from KZN is similar what the MPC was indicating, to say to the reputation if it's coming through there.
Yes, thank you very much, Mdu. I'm a bit worried I'm not taking over from the chairs. We're given 30 minutes as a Department of Human Settlements, so each province must take 10 minutes to present. I'm going to request HOD from
No,
North
DM. DM, don't worry, they are coming, the others in the afternoon. Yeah, if I use Honorable Magadla, Mangu, Hlengwa's approach, when they are chairing their committees, it's very interesting. When you come to present to their committees, they normally say, no, we've read the presentation, let's engage. And then you can see with the questions that they are more than ready. I can assure you that our committee members are ready, they've read the reports. We save the best for last. My brother, Deputy Minister Mahlobo, Water and Sanitation.
No,
the last presentation.
Thank you, Excellency. When I work in Babnyambi, and also Your Excellency, Comrade Coach Frolik, ministers and deputy ministers, the premiers, especially KZN, Babzigalala and Mape for Northwest, and the lead delegation led by Comrade MEC Ngata for the Eastern Cape and other MECs, and members of the ad hoc committee. On our case, Chair, we have made a presentation. I will do the introduction, and the DG will take us through our presentation. And our presentation, Chair, has been circulated on time. And in the main, with respect to water and sanitation, water is a very sensitive issue, very, very sensitive. And when the floods strike, they affected the 3 provinces as it has been indicated. But the biggest hit province in the main was KwaZulu-Natal. KwaZulu-Natal was hit on the basis of bulk infrastructure. In other words, the assurance of a supply or the availability of water was one of the biggest challenges. Even ourselves as a department through our water board, we had very serious issues around bulk infrastructure that was taken away. And we must commend your committee because you've been on the ground. We know that some of you have been to an area called Wangulus, where we have seen those biggest pipes. They are called aqueducts. Aqueduct 1 and 2, where you lost nearly more than 200 million liters of water per day that could have been supplied. And when you go to the Eastern Cape, a number of areas were affected, some of those districts. But the damages in the Eastern Cape, they were not so big. Well, I know that MEC Ngata will always raise the matter of Buffalo City because there were disasters before, but they're not part of the declaration. But you'll also raise the matter of Gqeberha. Every time he sees us, he will talk about Gqeberha. And in the Northwest, Premier, we know Ngaka Modiri was the one that is affected, but we have a number of issues because the water challenges are main. We can indicate that we came in as a department led by Minister under the directive of the President. We created an institutional mechanism. An institutional mechanism, we created a water war room. It involved a number of departments nationally that is associated with our work, including COCTA, especially their agency, MISA. We involved the affected provinces, the province of KwaZulu-Natal through the Office of the Premier, and then the relevant departments, including the municipalities that were affected. And in the main, the war room has been reporting to Provincial Disaster Management Center, ultimately to the National Disaster Management Center. Their main task was to ensure that people are actually given water as a matter of urgency. The presentation by the NDMC, eThekwini, they lost a lot of water in terms of assurance of availability of water. We lost, within that particular time, more than 50% of the water we normally provide of more than 800 million liters per day. We came to close to about 300 and something. And the system has been stabilized as we speak right now. Stabilized because in terms of our intervention, we brought the water boards closer at the disposal of these municipalities. We're to secure the availability of water. Most of the issues around bulk supply were currently now at more than 500 million that we're able to provide, especially in the most affected epicenter, which is Devon, eThekwini. But what we need also to mention, Chair, is that in as much as the assurance of supply is improved in most of the areas, there are areas that are still cut off, that doesn't have water. In the main, in the north, and you've been there to the north, and it's caused because the bulk infrastructure is totally collapsed and totally washed away. In instances where water was not available, we pull all resources ourselves, that the presentation will indicate. We're able to supply people in a short term through water cutting. We must admit, the water cutting had problems around the issues of management, distribution, and it's still a sore point in other areas, but there has been some improvements. But at the beginning, it was the biggest issue. One of the issues we also experience, co-chairs, municipalities are at the weakest as we speak right now in the country. And most of them, they are unable to discharge the responsibility of being water services authority, whether they are metros or not. There is not a single one that is not struggling. In KZN as an example, but all over, one of the biggest issues is non-revenue water. The infrastructure is old, very old. Even now we can provide them water, but they are losing 51%, especially eThekwini. 51% goes underground. If we give them 500 million liters, we know that more than 200 million is going to be lost. And in the main, we are working together to ensure that at least it's a fix up. But it's a temporary solution because even before the floods hit, we've reached a stage where the pipes must be replaced, Chair. That's why our assessment as a department and the assessment by MISA, we need a lot of billions of rands. We must replace the infrastructure. We can also indicate, Chair, that in as much as we've dealt with in terms of stabilization, we've brought in the technical teams, they've done assessment, plans have been developed, implementation is happening. One of the problems that is not being attended to is the state of the wastewater treatment works. As we speak, when the flooding happened, eThekwini before, they'd already had sewer going into the sea, going to our rivers, but the main systems was washed away. In the Eastern Cape and in the Northwest, the kind of the toilet system they're using, the sanitation system they're using got flooded. The sewer had to be able to be running out into people's surrounding, including our rivers. Pollution, Chair, is the biggest issue. It's continuing as we sit here. In that metro, I'm making an example, more than 300 million liters, they don't go to the treatment plant to be treated. And they go to the environment, and millions of rands are required to do these things. Therefore, the last stage of rebuilding, renewal of infrastructure is going to be the biggest stage. But at the very same, our attitude as a department is to say, we don't want this infrastructure to be restored or rebuilt to the same capacity. It must be rebuilt into a capacity that takes into account that it is growth. Because if you actually do it into the same standard, it's just a waste of time, Chair. And we thought we should be able to raise that issue. The other matter that we could improve is engagement with communities. Communities, how we communicate and how we share the plans. And in a number of instances, communities are very agitated because you can't live without water. And some of them, they've taken it into the streets, but the leadership on the ground are addressing those issues. The last point I want to raise is that there are organizations that are responding in terms of social compact and solidarity. In our own space, we've been assisted, even other private companies. I remember when there was a problem at Tegwin, business had brought some engineers. The gift of the givers is assisting in many areas. And in certain instances, a KwaZulu-Natal bottling company called Aquila has been assisting around water. In as much as there are certain instances where people wanted to politicize issues of water around donations and certain communities being neglected, the Defense Force for South Africa has also played an important role, and the other people that are there. But generally, I think we've tried to stabilize the situation. The situation remains very sensitive, Chair. And we need a lot of support, but also around building of institutions, around the institutional capability. At this stage, I'll ask the DG, Dr. Sean Phillips, to go through some of the issues that have been raised.
You are done.
Chairperson, you must
Minister
protect me.
Kungubele, please.
He's done.
Let's allow Dr. Phillips, the DG, to take us through.
Thank you, Chairperson. I'm presenting on damage to water and sanitation infrastructure in the 3 provinces of KZN, Eastern Cape and Northwest. The damage in KZN is far more than in the Eastern Cape and Northwest, and within KZN, the damage is far more in eThekwini than in other municipalities. This slide summarizes the damage in the eThekwini area immediately after the floods, which indicates that in the north of Durban, the red areas on the map, that's a map of eThekwini, the red areas of the map show where there was no water supply at all immediately after the floods in eThekwini. In the north of Durban, water supply was reduced by 250 megalitres per day. In the south, it was reduced by 100 megalitres per day due to damage to infrastructure, and in Tongaat, it was reduced by 16 megalitres per day. And there were other areas such as Hazelmere and Wiggins water treatment works which were impacted where no water could be supplied for approximately a week due to high levels of turbidity. Next slide, please. Only one part of our national water and sanitation infrastructure was mildly affected by the floods, and that was Hazelmere Dam, where we're in the process of raising the dam wall, to be able to supply more water to eThekwini and other areas. The construction work was temporarily stopped because the dam overflowed, but the work is back in progress again, and this will result in increased water supply, bulk water supply from us to the cities and towns in KZN. We're also working on the Umkomazi project and preparing for it to increase bulk water supply. But in summary, Chairperson, bulk water supply from DWS is not a major constraint to increasing water supply to communities in KZN. Currently, the major constraint is the damage to the municipal water and sanitation infrastructure. Next slide, please. We're responsible for Umgeni Water, which provides bulk distribution infrastructure on behalf of municipalities in the province, including eThekwini. And you can see two of the major Umgeni water aqueducts were badly damaged in the floods. Next slide, please. So aqueducts 1 and 2 were washed away in several places, which reduced water supply significantly from Nagle Dam to the Durban Heights water treatment works. Quickly, an alternative supply was brought in place from Inanda Dam to make up the deficit, which enabled us to reduce the deficit from 300 megalitres a day to 32 megalitres per day. Umgeni Water has insurance for its infrastructure, but they're not waiting to get the insurance money. They are using their own funds in the meantime, and they've appointed contractors to do the major repairs to those aqueducts, which is in the region of approximately R1 billion. One aqueduct will be repaired by December this year, and the other by June next year. Next slide, please. In order to support the municipalities which were badly affected, which were primarily eThekwini, Ugu, and Ilembe municipalities, our minister set up a water and sanitation war room, which was headed by the head of water and sanitation in eThekwini. Immediately on the Easter weekend following the floods, we were getting urgent requests from eThekwini in particular, but also the other two municipalities, to help them with water tankers, because it was apparent, as depicted from that earlier map, there were quite large areas which had no water supply at all. So we responded rapidly to that request to assist them with water tankers, and we got permission from National Treasury to reprioritize a portion of our grants. Normally, we are not allowed to give our grants to metropolitan municipalities. They get their grants for water and sanitation from human settlements, from the USDG. But Treasury quickly approved for us to reorient some of our grants to enable us to use emergency procurement to hire 82 tankers to assist these 3 municipalities, and those were supplied by the end of the Easter weekend, and to assist them to provide water to areas which had no water at all. We also deployed other resources to support the work streams which were established under the war room, to assist with things like assessment of the infrastructure damage, to monitor water quality, and to assist with communications. Next slide, please. In the infrastructure work team, we deployed a team of multidisciplinary engineers, civil, mechanical, and electrical, and geotech specialists to assist the municipalities with the assessment and quantification of the damage. The initial assessments were completed by the end of April, and then we did more detailed assessments to verify the initial assessments, and those more detailed assessments were completed by the 21st of May. Next slide, please. This again shows some pictures of the damage. You can see the wastewater treatment works in eThekwini. Several of them were very badly damaged. You can see there's one picture there of a sewer line which is completely broken and raw sewage running out. Next slide, please. So, as indicated by the Deputy Minister, eThekwini and the other municipalities have made progress in terms of restoring water supply. And this slide shows for eThekwini the extent to which normal water supply has been restored through temporary repairs in the different regions of eThekwini. So, for example, in the inner west region, it's been restored from 30% immediately after the floods to 80%. In the outer west region, from 45% to 80%. Central region, 45% to 70%. Southern region, 15% to 85%. And northern region, from 40% to 60%. In order to fully restore, much more substantial repair work needs to be done to the infrastructure. This restoration has been achieved largely through temporary repairs, while resolution of the funding issues for the more substantial infrastructure repairs is awaited. This slide shows the costings of the repairs, of the required repairs, which we worked on together with the various municipalities in KZN. And I'll run through the costs municipality by municipality. The third column shows the initial cost estimates done by the municipalities with our support, and the column on the right, which is the key column, shows our revised cost estimates based on more detailed assessments. So you can see from this slide that by far the biggest damage is in eThekwini, with 912 million worth of assessed damage in eThekwini to water and sanitation infrastructure. 305 million of which is water, and very substantial damage to the wastewater infrastructure, 606 million rand of damage to the wastewater infrastructure. In Ilembe, it's 34 million. In King Chetwayo, it's almost 14 million. In Mkhlatuzi, it's 1.8 million. In Umsunduzi, it's 450,000. In Ugu, it's 19 million. Next slide, please. In Ngongondlovo, it's 1.1 million. In Utugela, 12 million. In Amajuba, 3.9 million. In Umzinyati, 12.1 million. In Zululand, 7.6 million. Next slide, please. In Umkanyagudi, 5 million. In Harigwala, 21 million. Umgeni's, as I indicated, Umgeni, the damage to the aqueducts under Umgeni water is 900 million, close to 1 billion. So the grand total on the right-hand side of our estimates of the damage to the water and sanitation infrastructure is 2.2 billion. Next slide, please. In terms of funding applications, as I indicated, we worked with the municipalities and assisted them to compile costed lists of all the damaged infrastructure, and we separately submitted funding requests to the National Disaster Management Center and to COGT on the 3rd of May. Since then, there's been engagements, and we've also submitted our refined cost estimates. In addition to looking at replacing the infrastructure as it was, we also investigated how much it would cost if the infrastructure wasn't just replaced as it was, but it was replaced in such a way that it would be able to meet future demand. In other words, to build back better with upgraded infrastructure. And if it's going to be done in that way, the cost estimate rises from 2.2 billion to 7.8 billion. To date, in several municipalities, there's been reprioritization of existing grant funds to do repairs. There's been some initial disaster funding approved for Umsunduzi and Ilembe, and some recommended for Ugu. As indicated by the Premier, there are some complications with finalizing allocations to eThekwini, given that eThekwini has insurance for some of its infrastructure, and that complication appears to be delaying the allocation of disaster funding to eThekwini. So in summary, with regard to KZN, much of the water services have been restored, although albeit by doing temporary repairs, and there's a need to do much more substantial infrastructure repairs on the water infrastructure. We are very worried, as indicated by the Deputy Minister, about the state of wastewater treatment works and sewage pumping stations in eThekwini in particular, where, as indicated by the Deputy Minister, in eThekwini, 350 megalitres of raw sewage per day is flowing into the environment, into the rivers and into the sea because of the state of the wastewater infrastructure as it was damaged by the floods. Unfortunately, there was a mini flood again in May, which set back some of the restoration efforts, particularly for the wastewater treatment works. And although the first round of disaster fundings have been approved by the National Disaster Management Center, there's an urgent need to expedite further rounds of disaster funding. And as the work is done, we will monitor the restoration work by the municipalities. Turning to the Eastern Cape Province. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. This slide provides a summary of the damage in the Eastern Cape Province, which was much less than in KZN. In OR Tambo district municipalities, all municipalities were affected, with Port St. John's being the hardest hit. In Alfred and Zoe, There was some minor incidents of water and sanitation infrastructure damages, and they've all been fixed using their maintenance budget. In Joe Harvey, there were certain local municipalities affected. In Amatoli, all local municipalities were affected with some damage, which I'll get into just now. And in Chris Hani District Municipality, although the floods were severe, water and sanitation infrastructure was not affected. Next slide, please. In Amatoli District Municipality, this slide shows the detail of the damage in the various municipalities. Next slide, please. Sorry, just go back to Amatoli, the previous slide. On Amatoli, it shows the detail of the damage in Amatoli. They have already reprioritized some of their water services infrastructure grant budget allocation, and they have already done some of the repairs by reprioritizing some of the existing budget allocations. We've been working with them to do cost estimates and to assist them to prepare a technical report to apply for flood damage, which is currently estimated at approximately 22 million. Next slide, please. In OR Tambo, they have also reprioritized their existing grant funding and carried out much of the repairs already, and we've been assisting them with providing water tankers to provide water to communities without water in the meantime. Next slide, please. OR Tambo were able to use some of the existing contractors to get contractors on site quickly to do some of the repair work by reprioritizing some of the existing grants. This slide shows some of the detail of the damage in that district municipality. Next slide, please. In Joe Harvey, they have made progress in carrying out the required repairs, and that they've procured replacement pumps and motors, etc., and installed them. Next slide, please. They've assessed their damage to be 36 million, and we've also assisted that district municipality with some water tankers. And they've also been assisted by Amatola Water and Cogta and MISA to do technical assessments and to cost the damage. Next slide, please. In conclusion, in the Eastern Cape, all the verifications have been done. There's been reprioritization of existing grant money. Some of those reprioritizations are still being, requests have been still being assessed for the municipal infrastructure grant. While the repairs are being completed, interim supply of water is taking place through tankers. Finally, Chairperson, moving to the Northwest Province. The Northwest Province, the main problem is in Deelpan. And Deelpan is an area which is located in such a way that it's prone to being badly affected when there's heavy rainfalls. Next slide, please. It's situated at the bottom of the valley of a catchment, and the headwaters for most of the drainage lines drain towards the settlement. So it's very prone to being flooded. Next slide, please. You can see the flooding that occurred there. Next slide, please. This slide is just attempting to show that the drainage lines run, so that when there's heavy rains, all the water drains into the area where the Deelpan community is located. Next slide, please. That community is supplied with water from boreholes, two of which are located within the flood line. One of those boreholes was still flooded at 28th of June. The other borehole pump was damaged by the floods and has been sent for repairs by the municipality. The community has been receiving water via tankers from the municipality in the meantime, as well as tankers provided by the Department of Public Works. Next slide, please. We have been monitoring closely water quality in Deelpan and been providing information to the disaster office, and will continue to do that. And we're also assisting the municipality to develop plans for relocating the 2 boreholes which are located within the flood line. Next slide, please. So the estimated cost there is 3.3 million. Next slide, please. And they are, as we've indicated, we've assisting the municipality to prepare a technical report to apply for funding from the Water Services Infrastructure Grant and MIG to relocate those boreholes. Next slide, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Well done.
Thank you, Minister. Colleagues, Honorable Ministers, Deputy Ministers, Premiers, one thing that we can confirm that what we are presenting is the areas that we have visited. When we're in KZN, in some of the areas, members were able to walk the 5 Ks, and when they were supposed to go back, it's only myself and my co-chair that were able to walk back.
Yes.
Yesterday we're in Northwest. On a very serious note, yesterday we're in Northwest. We were supposed to check another site. And I can confirm that it's only myself and my co-chair that were able to get to the other site, because the cars but yesterday it was the issue of the cars. The cars that were used by the other members couldn't get there. That is why Premier Mape said to us, sometimes we must not be apologetic when doing oversight. Of course, we have to do it in a very respectful manner, but raise issues sharply and understand the dire situation. We have seen the magnitude of the damage, the houses, the infrastructure, water infrastructure, telecommunication infrastructure, the conditions that the people are facing on a daily basis. I'm just citing these 2 examples because with us, it was just 5 days in KZN, and the walking distance was just for that hour or 2 hours. Just imagine those people that are subjected to that situation on a daily basis. When we were able to cross yesterday, I asked myself, but those people, they are using tractors to pull their cars on a daily basis if they have to get to the other side in Northwest. With us, it's just an experience of 1 day. They are living with that. Now we're getting to the part where we'll be doing the engagement. My co-chair, Honorable Frolik, will assist. I must appreciate that we have done fairly well, honorable members, in terms of the time. We are very fine in terms of time, so we are going to be able to even have enough time when dealing with is no longer acting Minister of Finance, before he can have that 1 o'clock. Co-chair Frolik, can you take the process? Hands are up. Let's have the hands up, and Honorable Frolik will deal with the hands.
Okay, what we're going to do is, honorable members, is to deal with questions that's directed to the Acting Minister of Finance. And the reason for that is we need to release him so that he can attend to an important matter at the airport. So I will start with the following members: the Honorable Schlengwa, the Honorable Broutensith, the Honorable McPherson, followed by the Honorable, welcome back, Honorable Mashego. I'm glad you recovered from your ordeal. And then also the Honorable Gai. And then I'll continue after that round from the Honorable Mkalipi onwards. Okay? And the other 2. And honorable members, please keep it to the point and don't repeat questions that was asked by another member, please.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I'd already greeted earlier.
Yes, and introduce yourself, Honorable Schlengwa, and the rest that will follow.
All right, thank you, Chair. My name is Mkulego Hlengwa, a member of this committee. Chair, I want to first say whilst one appreciates the fact that the Acting Minister of Finance is here, I would really request that at another time, the Minister of Finance actually is here in one way or the other, because the meeting we had online with him when we were in the Eastern Cape, there was quite a number of things that were said to the extent to which aspersions were cast, even on the capacity of municipalities, notwithstanding what the DM has said now of Cooperative about the assistance that has been provided. I say that, Chair, because it created an impression which left a very bitter taste in one's mouth about the kind of cooperation that was there between Treasury and the affected municipalities. And now we get a presentation which is speaking about municipalities that have made applications and funds have been released. So I think that it would be very, very important, because it must provide a clarity about not just how treasuries interact with municipalities during the disaster, but on other operations. So I just thought I should raise that, because it was very unpleasant and quite frankly condescending and rude in terms of how things were actually couched. So that's not for the acting minister. I'm just putting it to you, Chair. The second point, Chairperson, then goes directly to the applications themselves and the monies that have been released. To say, whilst we note what has been released, which applications have been rejected, and on what basis have those applications been rejected, or where have funds been withheld by National Treasury, and for what reason? Because, Chair, these presentations create an impression that things are happening and being done, but the situation on the ground somewhat is very, very different in terms of movement and space. So one would be interested, Chair, to say, let's get a global picture. It's nice to see how much has gone, but where are the shortcomings insofar as releasing these funds? Linked to that, Chair, I would request that on the basis of what has gone, can we get an interaction with AG moving forward on audits which are aligned to the funds that have been released and the processes that have been employed by those municipalities in terms of procurement on the spending, and to check whether National Treasury is actually monitoring the expenditure on the ground, that it is consistent with what was applied for. Because many a times grants are released, when you get to the ground, they are being spent for something else, because that's the general practice. But here in this disaster, is the money actually going to the disaster? The final point, Chairperson, is about the 6 municipalities which have had funds released, as to whether any other technical support in the financial space has been deployed by National Treasury to those municipalities, over and above what COCTA may be doing insofar as assisting with applications. So maybe I'll leave it there, Chair. We'll just be brief. Thanks.
Honourable Broutensith.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, Honourable Flengwes has covered me in some
who are
areas.
you?
Sorry?
Introduce yourself.
Oh, I do apologise, Chairperson. My name is Tim Broutensith, and I'm a member of this committee, and I represent KZN in the NCOP. Siyabongela. Okay. Yeah, Chairperson, Honourable Flengwes has stolen some of my thunder. I think he was copying my notes. Anyway, Chairperson, I'm very concerned that in the, it's been happening for years, Chairperson.
We'll appoint a commission to look into that.
I'm very concerned that in the briefing document that we had for today, the Treasury noted a lack of capacity on the part of municipalities to do applications properly. And I want to echo what Honourable Flengwes said, is that we need to get a blow-by-blow breakdown from finance exactly as to which which municipalities have applied and where they were deficient. Because it appears that, you know, when you say lack of capacity, is that the lack of capacity to read? Because there's the Disaster Management Act, there's the PFMA, there's DORA. Just a matter of reading those things and getting it right. But I'm sure the Premier of KZN will testify, is there's a disconnect between what the province is putting together and what Treasury is putting together. So I think we need to have a blow-by-blow to actually get rid of that bottleneck, DM, if we can really get into that. Then the other concern I have is it relates to finance. Well, yeah, it relates directly to financing. It relates directly to something I can see is going to be a problem. Financing handed over to the Department of Human Settlements. We have to be sure that human settlements via Treasury, because I'm sure they have to report on funds that they get, is reporting specifically on the issue of exactly how much is issued in a housing voucher, and that housing voucher is linked to a specific specification, and that specification is rolled out from Eshowe to Deelpan, exactly the same, and that contractors along the way can't skim and provide a house for 30 grand in one case where they've skimmed 35 and provide 65 in the other case where they haven't skimmed anything. We've got to be absolutely vigilant to that. And because Treasury is advancing that, we need to be very, very diligent on that. Then I just want to also echo what, and add on to what Honourable Hlengwa said about, I really do believe, I don't think the AG is here today, but it's been 3 months now. In a few days' time, it'll be 3 months since the April floods. A lot of money has been spent. From the reports that are coming through from Public Works, from Water and Sanitation, from COGTA, a lot of money has been spent. And yet we have still not seen, I think we need to have a call for an interim report, and nothing to finance that can be motivated, but an interim report exactly, and specifically highlighting incidents of irregular expenditure and fruitless and wasteful expenditure. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. The Honourable McPherson.
Thanks very much, Chair. Dean McPherson, I'm a member of the committee in the National Assembly. So I think just to start off with, co-chairs, you know, there's a lot of representation in this room today, but the one area of representation that's missing, again, is from eThekwini municipality. That is where the epicenter of the disaster exists, and yet there's no one from the municipality here. And I don't know whether they were invited or not, but again, it remains the big elephant in the room that the mayor's conduct or interaction with him to date has been non-existent. And I think that that remains a huge problem for this municipality and for government to consider, that a metro mayor where there has been 450 people have lost their lives, there has been no interaction with this committee. And that is where the bulk of the funding eventually will end up. And I think the committee should continue to reflect on that matter. The minister started off with saying that, you know, we need to own up to our faults. And I think that he was referring to the fault of, you know, sort of the pronouncement of the 1 billion rand and how it's been sort of communicated or badly communicated. And the Premier correctly said that his province and himself particularly, and I do feel for him in this point, has had to shoulder much of that anger. But, Minister, the problem doesn't or didn't generate with Minister for Finance. It started when the President swooped into the province on day 2 after the flood, said there's 1 billion rand, and then disappeared, and then everyone had to scramble to pick up the pieces as to what that looked like. And I think that that's actually where the problem originated, is that politicians come and make promises and make pronouncements without understanding the mechanics of how it works, and then everyone else in different spheres of government has to pick up the pieces. So I think, in fact, actually the apology or the explanation needs to come from the presidency, because that's where the expectation was generated from. to begin with. The true cost we know, Minister, is more 25 billion. So we're scratching at the surface with the billion. We're talking peanuts in the bigger scheme of things. And that's what concerns me, is we're fixated on a small number when the problem could take decades to deal with. And no one wants to talk about, well, where does the 25 billion come from? Because what I object to as a citizen of KwaZulu-Natal is the Premier and his MECs having to reprioritize their budgets, which will essentially come from frontline services in health and education to deal with infrastructure and housing issues. And that can't be right, Minister. We cannot cut frontline services and expect the province to reprioritize its budget when that money should be coming from national. Because in your own words, you know, local disaster gets dealt with local funding, etc. And when it is beyond the competency or the ability of the province to deal with that disaster, national should be funding that and should be providing for that. But it's not. It's only providing 5% or less of the total cost to rebuild. And I would just like to understand why that is. We've spoken much about the contingency reserves, and you've mentioned it, and the Premier's mentioned it previously. But why has the contingency reserve been whittled down to such a small number? Previously, it used to be 10 billion rand, which used to be an escape hatch for SAA. But we should be using 10 billion rand of the contingency reserve into rebuilding, not 1 billion. So what actually exists in the contingency reserve, and why is only 1 billion out of it being used? Wendy had said that, you know, roughly 29% of the money released already has been used, but what real-time audits have been conducted on that 290 million that's been spent already? And I think I'll leave it there. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Honorable Mashego.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning to members of the ad hoc committee. And I want to assume that both ministers and deputy ministers that have joined us, they become themselves members of the committee by practice, because they are now here. Chair, the Igamalami Ngu Robert Mashiko, I'm a member of the National Assembly, but also a member of the committee. And I want to appreciate the fact that the minister, in his opening remark, which I just don't understand whether is he realizing today that we are planning in silos, because I remember that the minister, Enoch, said that when we met, that this silos planning and it is creating a problem. That was last month when we met. The minister is starting there again. The assumption I was making when the minister said that was that because of that, they are going to start planning differently to disallow this silos planning and silos working. Because that is where the problem is. You will realize that one of the reasons that the departments are talking about where they have done work, how much they spend, others, how much they are planning, because they are planning in their corners, not necessarily not with the center holding. We were supposed just to call one Ministry of Finance to tell us where we are in terms of funding, what is the difficulties, and who is going to do what, and then we do that. Now we are listening to all silos thinking, because it is how we are working. So Minister of Finance, and I want to believe that you own to assets and liabilities of your taking over. I do not accept this view that consistently when we meet, you will confess that silos working is not correct, but to keep on planning silosly. What is that statement for? the impression created, and I think it is important, as the Premier of KZN is saying, that there is a statement need to be done, whether it is by President, the Minister, the Deputy Minister, whoever, that 1 billion rand, what does it meant when it was set? And how is it going to work? Because then you have got, when Wendy presents, she says to us, yes, 1 billion rand is available, just like your Holland insurance will do. You can apply for a funeral cover of up to 2 million, but terms and conditions apply. So when that terms and conditions apply, you can only end up at 10,000 rand because you don't meet certain requirements of the terms of conditions of the work. So that 1 billion will never be touched by anybody. It will be a khoho sitting somewhere. For you to get there, you must meet certain requirements on your way to it, which will disallow you to access that money. And this is what is happening now, that 1 billion will remain a money that is not acceptable. And this is what I think that the request by Premier Zikalala is dangerous when it comes to that point. Because when we were in KZN, just for information, all of us, myself, the chair of chairs, the both of them, and yourself, you remember when we got a truck driver? He spoke in Zulu, could not hear him, but he said to us, yeah. He said to us, "Ya ngoba kula ebelungwini hey nibaningi man. Nizile la elokishini ani." Now, ngoba besisemhlanga beachfront, no, siyanibona. You are not working the way we are. Our people who have got nothing, you don't care about them. Now, Premier Zikala uthi no. Please pay those big companies that have got insurance claims in advance. Then when the insurance pay you can then get your money. The trap there is that you want to satisfy those that have at the expense of the not haves. Because the not haves does not have insurance. They want to be helped today. But the haves are waiting for the big insurance companies to pay, which payment can be declined, remember? So you will have given them money, and then the claim get declined. So you do not get your money back, a premier. We really need to look into that as a way of doing things. And to me, all other ministers, because they are implementing agencies of the finance and the Minister of Finance Department, they are just implementing agencies. That money must be escalated to payment, and we must deliver. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. The Honorable Khai.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. Greetings to the co-chairs, the ministers, deputy ministers, premiers and MECs, also members of the committee. My starting point, Chair, would be because the statement that was made by the President when declaring the state of disaster, he mentioned this immediate availability of 1 billion, but also that he was to approach Parliament for additional funding. I just want to find out as to when is that process going to start. I heard, I think Wendy was talking about the appropriation bill that has not yet been finalized. I don't know which bill she's referring to, because as far as I understand, Parliament has already done so, unless you're referring to a special appropriation that is still going to be tabled in Parliament. So I just needed clarity with regard to that. Or you're still referring to the current bill, perhaps that the President has not yet ascended to, if you could clarify with regard to that aspect. But also, I want to find out we note all the grants that you're referring to, that amount to a billion. But in terms of the damages, more than that, is there any new money other than just the grants and the reprioritization of budget? But also, if you could list the total amount of the reprioritized budget, other than just the grants, how much do they amount to? But also the issue of the spending by provinces with regard to the grants that have been allocated to them already. Perhaps also the province will need to update us this afternoon, coaches, because in terms of the report that we're receiving is that the money will be in trenches. They will get the rest after they've spent up to 80%. So we need to get a status report as to how far provinces have gone in terms of in terms of the expenditure, so that there are no delays in terms of getting the 100% allocation. I think the other issue also related to the applications would be the turnaround time. When applications have been received from provinces, what is the turnaround time in terms of the disbursement of funds? So if we could also get clarities with regard to such questions. Thank you very much, Honorable Kocha.
Thank you. Honorable Minister, there's a number of questions that have overlapped in this input, so I'm going to allow a few more questions so that you can nicely round it towards the end. Honorable Mkalipi.
Thank you very much, Chair. My name is Klingwe Mkalipi, a member of this committee in good standing. Thank you very much, Chairperson. No, Chair, my questions to Acting Minister of Finance. One, when the ad hoc committee visited KZN, when we wanted to meet with a eThekwini municipality, none of the political leadership at municipality level was available. And my colleague from DA, after a few days, posted on the WhatsApp group a newspaper headline, quoted the Deputy Mayor, saying that we don't want meetings, we want action. And I was angry by that statement at that time. But unfortunately, I agree with him now. We need action. Because to me, after 3 months, coaches, we are just receiving a report from Treasury to say out of that 1 billion that was announced immediately after the disaster. 3 months, we are receiving a report to say out of that 1 billion, how much has been dispersed to provinces. I think is unacceptable. And this is not the first time we have a meeting with the minister who's now wearing a cap as a finance minister. The time he was a minister from the presidency. And we also said to him, when we were engaging him at a committee level, we need to move with speed because we are talking about the lives of people, especially the poorest of the poor, who are depending on government on this matter. And he agreed with us that time. I remember, and he's not arrogant. One thing about this minister, he is not arrogant. When we also press him to ask him, do you have a capacity as the minister from the president to attend to this matter? He was not arrogant. So now, when we receive a presentation, which, Chair, you must not call me into order because we're still going to engage with that presentation from the Department of Public Works, what I have noticed in that presentation, the gentleman there, I can't remember, is Lloyd, is Mr. Lloyd or is Mr. who, he said on the presentation, as the department, they have a target due date, which is end of June, for their intervention as a department. I think that's what we need from the minister as well, finance. And please go and tell your colleague that we need that kind of a time frame. 1 billion was announced. You are saying that, no, we have disperse so amount. So for how long? Because now in the afternoon, when provinces come, we must be clear from the money that was sent from your department to them. Because ours here is to ensure that people are getting services after the disaster. If you can be clarified as well, because the presentation from Wendy is saying, no, once we have transferred 16.6 million for Alfred Nzo, they must use 80% of it in order for us to continue. If they decided to take forever to use that 80 million, so can you tell us as a department, we give you 16.6 million as the department and we are expecting results, because we are not talking about normally, we are talking about disaster here, which needs to be attended. So can we be clear for that as well? And then the last point here, Chair, is that we need to be clear in terms of your coordination. For instance, we are saying, I'm giving 325.8 million is approved for KZN for housing grant. And then other departments are saying, people who are affected, they are still in community halls. But the grant for housing is given, 325 from your department. But they are saying, Tina, as departments, we have only identified 14 pieces of land, right? And then you must tell us, as a department, or if you just give money and then said, no, it's for grant for housing, as to where are those houses are going to be built, are you also concerned, or are you also going to get a report from them? Okay, are we giving you this money, and then it's for house, where are you going to build those houses? Or once we have given out money, is it okay with the department? Because I think we are going to go around in circles about this issue of disaster. And I already have a concern that it means that you are not moving with speed that's supposed to be, because we are dealing with the lives of poor people. And this is my issues with the department. If I can be clarified with those, I'll be very happy. And the purpose of coordination, if you are saying it's for grant for the municipalities, it's for the departments in KZN, so how do you coordinate them when as a department then now to say, I have given municipalities, 6 municipalities in KZN, so I'm waiting for the progress report in order for the status report that is suggested by my colleague here. So how do you coordinate that? And this is not the first time, co-chairs, when we raise this issue. We raised it with the KZN when we started this process in KZN. The main effect is the coordination process. In order for us as members of this ad hoc, when we go to people, we are clear as well. Good, no, this is going on. But if not, now I'm going to talk like that man, honorable member who's going to talk in Sizulu here. Now we are going to understand me. If it's here, how am I going to also account to that poorest of the poor who has been there in the community hall in KZN? I'm not even clear what are the timelines of the department. They are giving money out there, and then we don't know what is going on. I don't know how I'm going to say to this poor woman, hi, we are going to get your house in the next 3 months or 4 months, or we are going to stay here forever. Thank you very much, Chair.
I wonder who question your membership in this ad hoc committee for you to tell us where are in good standing.
The Honorable Manku.
Thank you very much, Chair. My name is Lisa Mangu, Uhlatu Jambas, Uhlangomveweni, Sanzanza. Mfen. Chairs, no, she copied, and I appreciate once more the presence of premiers, members of the executive, deputy ministers, my colleagues in the ad hoc committee. I stood up earlier, Chair. I went to the room, I went to Grandpa. I took it outside, that Grandpa, because I felt a severe headache. Because on the 1st of July, I thought we were close to saying, by the end of this declaration, the first 3 months by legislation, we are closer to answers to the people who are suffering. But regrettably, I think I just felt so depressed more than what I saw in KZN, more than what I saw in Port St. John's in particular. Chair, I think we must say it for what it is. And Minister Gungubele, I will take this opportunity because you are also Minister of Monitoring and Evaluation. There is no coordination at all. Let's say it the way it is. And I think we are appealing to you that you pull this together for the sake of the people of South Africa. And I think it will be remiss of me not to appreciate the immediate responses that different departments did, municipalities, SEPs, and all those people who went in there, gave food, looked there, they even lost their own lives trying to save people's lives. I think maybe we have not acknowledged that. We might sound like nothing good has happened at all. I think those efforts need to be recognized. But I think having recognized those, we were expecting that at least there will be some immediate attention to close the gap there in terms of what is happening. And I think we need to say this coordination is really lacking, and we think you can help us pull this together. We thought that as a declaration of a national state of disaster, COGTA will pull this together, but clearly, let us say it is not coming through at all. And I'm sure that something can be done, because there are pockets of excellence. We can't run away from that. Now, Chair, I always want to maybe try and suggest what I think are suggestions going forward. But there are clearly some things that I would like the Minister then, the team from Finance to assist us with. There is the people that I spoke about, the police, metros, I think Cape Town, many metros assisted, sent their people there. How is that cost that they incurred treated? Is it part of this pool that we are talking about? Or is it something that they took themselves on their shoulders? They will find how they treat it financially, because there was also a cost to that. And secondly, again, my colleagues have said it, but I think they didn't say it the way it is. We were told that applications did not meet requirements, and that, I think, was repeated in the presentation today. Is it possible that we can know how many of these applications were received, how many didn't meet the requirements, and what is being done to resolve that issue so that it can unlock the money? Section 56(2)(b) of this Disaster Management Act says the cost of repair and replacing of public sector infrastructure is borne by the organ of state where this infrastructure has been damaged. Now, that to me seems to be in contradiction of what we are talking about, because it says, therefore, that the province of KwaZulu-Natal must take care of its roads and its bridges. I don't know how we can reconcile these two. There's R1 billion, if it is there. There's this section of the act that says they should take care of that. I just need an explanation there, just Education 101, what that would mean. And lastly, Chair, again, the immediate relief, we're told 6 municipalities in KZN were assisted, but the presentation spoke about Msunduzi, 619,500. It talked about Mkambati, 8.2 million rand. Is it possible to know which other municipalities of the 6 that were mentioned would have received this money? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. The Honorable Bibi.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Greetings to the ministers, deputies, and also the premiers, and also the MECs, and all protocol observers. Oh yes, bye-bye.
Love you, Mama.
I love you too, bye-bye. Chairperson, it's a pity that in my province they call me mamas. And in the national, they call me Mama. That's nice. Okay, no, Chairperson, unfortunately, all my questions have been tabled by the members, especially Honorable Shangwa and Honorable Mashihu and Honorable Mangu. But for me, is to say that I just want to check with the Treasury that how long does it take when the municipalities apply? And secondly, I just need the specifics of municipalities that have applied and the amount of money that you have given them. And also, as Honorable Mahleng has mentioned, that the time frame, we would like to know from now, when we go out of this room, to know the time frame. When are you going to give these municipalities these monies? And also, I was glad with my, oh, I didn't say so, did I say? Oh, Lindwe Bibi from NSOP representing KwaZulu Natal. I didn't introduce myself, guys. I'm part of this ad hoc committee. Nevertheless, I would like to know those specific, I'm actually emphasizing into what other honorable members have said. But I'm so glad that it was KwaZulu-Natal, my province, yenza izinto zenzeke. Although there were no funds, but they managed to scramble around to ensure ukuthi abantu bakithi on the grassroots level, abantu layo bathola usizo. Bengithi angikusho ngesizulu lokho so that kuzozwakala kahle. Ngesingisi akuzozwakala kahle. Ngiyabonga sihlalo ngaphambili. Thank you very much, my two coaches.
No, thank you, Honorable Bibi, but you did introduce yourself as Mamas and Mama. Is there any other member who want to ask a question that hasn't been asked yet? Because we tend to repeat. You know, saying English is a very flowery language, we just change here and there, but you ask exactly the same thing. Yes, the Honorable Dikeledi.
Thank you, coaches. My name is Dikeledi Direko. I'm a member of the committee. Let me also greet the ministers, deputy ministers, premiers, MECs, and everyone who's here, protocol observed. And Chair, let me also welcome the presentation that have been made. Chair, one of the most common challenges we have in terms of disaster management is that funds allocated on a conditional basis end up being returned to Treasury because some of the municipalities and the provincial government are struggling to develop plans, programs, and a budget to utilize them. Some of municipalities do not even have a proper disaster management policies in place. So in that situation, is there any technical or administrative support that is being provided to such municipalities in order to ensure that the need of our people which have been interrupted by disaster are being met? And secondly, Chair, in my view, the state is supposed to mobilize all sections of society in order to champion developmental issues. What effort have the government made to get all the stakeholders on board and also to mobilize the financial resources beyond the public purse? And also, is there a proper coordination plan of all the private funders that we have received in this disaster? The reason why I'm asking is because of what the Premier of KZN has raised regarding the issue of the private funds. So is there any coordinated plan that is going to assist us to address this matter? And Chair, the last one, in KZN, they have about 8,584 houses that are destroyed and 13,536 houses that are damaged. So far, how much has been spent on temporary residential units, and also how many outstanding temporary residential units that still needs to be built? The reason why I'm asking is because when you go through the report, you realize that there's a money that has already been distributed to the province, close to 140-something million. But when we were on the ground, we realized that there were few temporary residential units which were there. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. The Honorable Hussein.
Chair, thank you very much. Some of the questions have been covered already, so I promise you I won't repeat them. My name is Hanif Hussein, also a member of this committee. Chair, I have just 3 issues that I want to raise for finance, DWS, as well as housing very briefly. But I just want to make this one comment, Chairperson, and I think yesterday's visit in a way was a bit of an eye-opener. If there's one thing I think that we have learned as a committee in this process, is that it's exposed the ability of our governments at different levels to be able to move with the speed that's required by the people on the ground, especially at a time of disaster. That's the one big thing. But the other thing for me, I think, is the lack of coordination, as my honorable colleague has raised earlier, between the various spheres of government. When we went to KZN, we saw how they produced temporary housing units for about 60,000 rand. But yes, Northwest Province yesterday says 59 million rand at a cost of about 180,000 per unit. So it's that, I think, lack of coordination and oversight by the departments itself on National Treasury hands out money to the provinces hand it out to the municipalities. But on the ground, as Honorable Schlengewa had said earlier, the experience is very different to the people because there's just that poor coordination, poor oversight from the various departments, which is why on the ground things take forever. In eThekwini, for example, Chairperson, not only do we have load shedding now, we've got water shedding there for 6 hours a day because of the Durban Heights waterworks, as the gentleman earlier spoke about. And that's a frustrating issue, Chairperson, because from what I understand and the public understands, there are 2, they call it aqueducts, which are 2 major pipes. But it's only going to be repaired in June next year and December this year. And in the meantime, the municipality is going to be tankering water to the various communities. In Tongaat alone, which happens to be my constituency, the municipality spends about 7 million rand a month just delivering water to that community. Which means that the revenue that the city relies on we're not going to get that revenue as well because it's free water. So not only are we throwing good money away, we're also not attending to the infrastructure that's a problem. In 2006, Chairperson, we spoke about, as the Deputy Minister spoke just now, that eThekwini, 51% of the water is going into the ground, 51%. And so we're spending hundreds and hundreds of millions of rands trying to purify this water, collect it in the dam, and we're just throwing it away in the ground. But we knew about this for 5 years, and we know about it again now. And yet there still isn't a plan on the table that says, we will fix this problem by this date. And it's now going to cost us R1 billion. And so the question I want to put to Deputy Minister, if we government had known that there is this problem in eThekwini on the lack of maintenance on the infrastructure, for so many years.
Honorable Sen, my apologies to interrupt you. We're only focusing because we want to release the minister. We will come back. We're going to have a tea break after the minister has responded, and then we will deal with the other presentations that was made.
I will just conclude that point, Chairperson, in that if we had known about this issue for so long, why is DWS not doing something about it? Let me go quickly to the issue of the finance question, Chair, because of the rush. Chairperson, when we were in eThekwini, I was hoping to put this issue to the Deputy Mayor. Honorable Schlengewa had raised it earlier, but he refused to attend that meeting, so I have no other choice to raise it now. And for Treasury especially. There is this Tongaat waterworks that we visited already, which is going to cost about 60 million rand to repair. And the information that I've received, Chairperson, that there are politicians involved in that award of that tender, and that the municipality is in Section 36 award. I've also been told, and I was going to put this to the Deputy Mayor in that closed meeting, but he refused to attend, that there are politicians, including the Deputy Mayor, who met with contractors here in Johannesburg. Now there's an appeal on that tender. And there's going to be even further delays on the delivery of water in the Tongaat area, costing 7 million rand. So I want to ask Treasury Chairperson as well, and I think I've raised this previously with the Auditor General, to look into the management of that Section 36 award for the Tongaat Waterworks repairs. I'll come back to the other issue later on when there's another opportunity. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Member. There's been hands that side. I'm not going to, please, Honourable Members, don't repeat what has been asked. Don't repeat what has been said. We will have another session after the tea break with the other minister and deputy ministers that are here. Honourable Dutoy.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. Honourable Chair, I would like to know what is the approved rand value requested? Sorry, my name is Fani Dutoy. I'm a member of this committee hailing from the Northwest Province. What is the approved rand value requested by provinces for the rapid response up to now, the total? Does National Treasury have an indication of how much money will be needed for phase 2, and will we have those funds? Have any of the funds that were donated to the Solidarity Fund been released to municipalities? And what is the criteria of release of such funds? And I want to know, with regards to the 3 municipalities in the KZN area that is currently under administration and was under administration when the disaster struck, and that were requested or basically forced to redirect funds to attend to the disaster. How did that play out? And were additional assistance given to those municipalities? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Member. You were very clear. Honourable Lasoma.
Thank you, Chair. Masibingelele ko-Minister nako-Premier namalungu eParliament ekhona nabasizi bakahulumeni that makes government tick. NguMainoka Lesoma, member of this committee. Thank you very much. Chair, I will provide a disclaimer to say that you'll forgive me if my English will sound like I'm repeating others' points that have been raised by other honorable members. Yeah. Chair, if it was for me, without dramatizing the disaster, I would have avoided the collective of this committee becoming a disaster itself. I will tell you why. The way we respond as government, it seems like it's business as usual. There is no sense of agency. I would have said, probably let's go to those halls one day and sleep there and eat the food that our people are eating, and also how they interact with each other. But nevertheless, we're not going to do that because we are not dramatic by our nature. How I would have loved, Chair, the Minister of Finance, who is here now, the warm body, would have been the same warm body that we interacted with 2 weeks back. Because we fail when we respond. We think that we are responding to honorable members here, whereas we are responding to the people who are outside there, our communities, if we may use that word, that are usizo labo luzakuvela kuhulumende, where they are looking upon us to provide solutions. And the presentation made by Honorable Kungubela, the Minister of Finance, it talks to regulations, like it's business as usual. I thought also what he is going to recommend, leave alone the issue of expropriation or special dispensation, which has not spoken to. I thought probably would say that, how would we as this committee assist to have a special dispensation of appropriation? But nevertheless, that one is not said. Probably it's between the lines. How would I have wished, Chair, that the Minister now of DPME, who's the pillar in terms of coordinating activities of government, that would have received that matrix so that would have saved time. Because you can't measure something that is not measurable, which is not specific, doesn't have a responsibility person, and the likes. It becomes a problem because even the cross-checking of figures, you can't do that one. You will always piggyback what you think your memory gives you. With that, Chair, I'm covered by honorable members, but I'm sure that the issue which the Premier of KZN, without being KZN orientated, must be taken seriously as one of the recommendations, coupled to say, as this committee, we must have fund in our hearts and our minds, not to treat eThekwini as a special municipality. However, there is a greater need that we go there and engage with that municipality. Thank you very much, Chair.
No, thank you, Honorable Asoma. Honorable Baga, followed by the Honorable Zungula.
Masibulele Sihlalo. Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity. I think that most areas have been covered by different members of this committee. But for me, Chairperson, Gumbulelo Baga, olilungu lale committee. Chair, for me, I think the main important thing that we have to look at and coordinate and consolidate is the issue of donations. Because I think that donations are kind of assisting us in breaking down what needs to be done, needs to be organized, and in a sense, we are able to then see that this is how much we are getting from outside, and therefore this is what we would have to raise as a government to provide for the people. So I think, for me, coordination of donations, and that must be broken down as we are given a report thereof. The second one, Chairperson, for me is, I didn't hear much about the Northwest in terms of the presentations that were made here. I think I had from one presentation. And I'm not sure whether there is a specific reason for that, and if there is, it would be great to get a sense of what the situation is and why is Northwest not that mentioned in terms of the presentations. The last one, Chairperson, which I think that requires more emphasis, is there are people in KZN, for an example, who were suspicious of the provincial government in terms of providing what has been given to them by national government. Meanwhile, the provincial government had not received anything at the time. Now, which means that it's important to treat this process as open as possible. And for me, it would have been great, for instance, to sit with one ministry that represents the entire government in a consolidated report, give us all the information that is necessary and required so that we engage with that one report. I think Honorable Mangu was kind of alluding to that effect in his presentation. Thank you, Chairperson.
Honorable Zungula.
Thank you, Chairperson. The name is Vuyo Zungula, member of the committee. Mine will be very brief, Chair. Taking into cognizance how the disaster relating to COVID was handled, you had the national government doing the procurement of vaccines, basically managing the emergency situation of dealing with COVID. Now, this year we have another disaster. Fortunately or unfortunately, it's not in all provinces in South Africa. It's just limited to 3 provinces. However, it is still of emergency, particularly to the people who've lost their homes. Now, what I need to find out, Chair, what is the rationale of changing the system of doing the procurement, in the sense that initially, one would expect, because of the urgency that is there when people have lost their homes, we would have national government or national treasury or one department, for example, doing the procurement of the TRUs and dispatching to the respective affected areas. However, you've got a system whereby municipalities have to apply. They might get rejected, and it takes a long process whereby municipalities would get their money to them. And after the municipalities have gotten the money to them as municipalities, they still need to follow processes in terms of identifying contractors. So I wanted to find out what has informed the change of the system that elongates the process of actually dealing with this disaster. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. And the last intervention will come from the Honourable Zanda Mela.
No, thank you, Chairperson. Greetings to the co-chairs and ministers. My name is Sam Zandamela, the member of this committee. Mine is straightforward, Chair. It's directed to the Minister of Finance. I know there was an intervention at some point in Mangaung, if I'm not mistaken, by Cooperative. And there was a team from Treasury that was deployed in that municipality. Is it possible that the minister can, because there's a problem with coordination that was raised here, is the department able to set up a team of coordinators like you did in Mangaung? We're talking 3 provinces here, or 3 municipalities or more. 1 coordinator in Northwest, Eastern Cape, so that you sort out the issue of the coordination. Thank you.
No, thank you, Honourable Member. Minister Gungubele.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. Thank you, Honourable Members, for what one views as a very robust interaction. I'm just going to say 1 or 2 things, and Ms. Fo will respond to a lot of details, and I'll come to close. I'm deliberately doing this because I think she must explain the time lag of applications. It's very, very important, because there is a possibility of leaving this house believing that Treasury is actually withholding money. She will have to explain that. And 2, I'll come back on this. I think the issue of technical support, 2 or 3 honourable members have raised that to say, if you see that there is a problem which is ongoing and you are not getting the application as required, what do you do as Treasury? I think that question has come very, very strong. The other point, before she comes into these details, I want to repeat this, because I think it keeps coming. When the president spoke about 1 billion, I was there. When the minister spoke of 1 billion, I know. I remember this because 1 billion does exist. We've explained it here, that part of it gets deployed to housing, human settlement, part of it gets deployed to Cooperative. There's a transferring officer who released that money per what to call application. But you will have listened that there's an order, there are certain other monies that either province or municipality must disperse, deal with those. Just to give an example, there's a routine allocation, in particular to infrastructure departments, of an amount, even if there's no disaster that year, that money is always there. When you have this disaster, get done with that money. When that money doesn't help, and then move to this other one, which is beyond you. And what I'm also going to request as Ms. Fo come is let's separate 2 things. Payment for immediate relief. Because all the money we're speaking about is payment for immediate relief. People must get TRUs, must have access to water, have access. There's a pipe that you cannot afford even a day, moving in a part. Those issues that stabilize life. We're talking about immediate. But I don't think this is intended. Confusing that with multi-billions, which we know are going to come, by the way, which through proper budget processes will be accessed and be made available per verified damage and so on. And I'm requesting that let's not make that confusion. But however, I want to repeat the issue of 1 billion, and at any time this announcement is done, even the president, even the minister, if by mistake that has happened, will actually take the fall, accept that mistake and apologize. Let me explain what I'm going to say. If there's a time when National said there's 1 billion for KwaZulu-Natal disaster, KwaZulu-Natal, it's always said 1 billion is available for emergency disaster. If there's one, even an official of us, who said for KwaZulu, and then I mean, an apology will have to be made. We say to access, which can be accessed, we still stand by that. We'll make an apology if there's someone who said there's this money of 1 billion exclusively meant for KwaZulu. Then it needs to be corrected. But I'll ask Ms. Fo, there's a lot of details that, ma'am, you have to come, a lot of questions that members of parliament have asked. And I repeat, there is a strong view that we are delaying processes. Let her explain. There's also another mistake that there seems to be a temptation that when there's a disaster, there must be no procedures. There's that temptation. But all what we want, we are open to be criticized about. If the procedures are not adapted to disaster, then we can deal with that. But to say there should be no procedures, I'm sure we should correct that. But if our procedures are not adapted to disaster, we'll accept that fault. Mefrofo, can you take the mic and deal with the details?
Thank you very much. Can I start with the issues that the Minister specifically asked me to clarify? And the first one, and it was raised quite a number of times, the time lags in after an application has been made and with regard to the release of funding. And what is quite important here, as was pointed, as was pointed out, is that there's a need for processes to be followed. And the first price when a disaster happens, and that is sometimes take a bit of time. For example, if a municipality is impacted by a disaster, then they first need to go assess what those damages are and determine the extent of those damages. So that takes a bit of time. That is a process that's either undertaken by the municipality concerned or the province concerned. After that verification assessment process have been completed by either the municipalities concerned or the provinces concerned, they then need to submit their submission to the Provincial Disaster Management Centre. The Provincial Disaster Management Centre then submits that submission to the National Disaster Management Centre. The National Disaster Management Centre actually need to undertake their own verifications on that process. So National Treasury, all those processes, National Treasuries receive nothing. We only receive an application for funding after all those processes have been completed, where the NDMC then actually make the submission to us. What we're trying to do is we're in constant contact with the NDMC so that we're aware what applications are potentially coming, so that we can actually do the paperwork as fast as we can. So as soon as we receive an application from the National Disaster Management Centre for immediate disaster relief funding, we process it in a day or two. That's how long it takes. And the approval that we then give is we give the national department concerned the authority to release that money. So the money is not released by the National Treasury, it is released by either the National Department of Human Settlements or COCTA, and that is done in a day or two as well. So after those processes have completed, the delays are not in the processing of the release of funding. That can happen very fast. And I'm referring just to the immediate disaster relief funding. I'll ask my colleague, Julia de Bruin, to come in with a longer term budget process and deal with that in a bit more detail. What technical support do we provide? We provide technical support to assist and enable the fast release of the money. So as I pointed out previously, and maybe the NDMC can come in here as well, what we do is when they get applications, some of the applications have issues and outstanding issues that need to be clarified. What then does is where the National Treasury can help, we also then link up with the departments concerned. For example, the issue was raised by the Premier about the issue about social development funds. We're currently working, for example, with the KZN Provincial Treasury. We're working with the National Department of DSD as well, together with the NDMC, to identify what are the issues that need to be clarified. what are the actual amounts that's involved? And some of those questions, we're waiting for information. We're trying to assist in securing that information so that those applications can be processed. So really, we're trying to help as far as we can in this process. Then the issue was also raised, another stumbling block in the issue raised with regard to eThekwini. And again, we are aware of the issues, and there's two issues that we're trying to clarify there. The one issue has got to do with insurance, and we're also getting all the stakeholders together so that we can actually determine what are the actual underlying issues that need to be addressed. Because, for example, it does not help us if it's, for example, said that it takes long to process. We need more information than just that. We really need to understand what are the stumbling blocks, what are the appropriate solutions to get towards those solutions. And then another issue, there's a bit of a debate currently going on between the National Department of Human Settlements and eThekwini on the reprioritization of conditional grants. We're trying to understand, again, together with the eThekwini, together with the Department of Human Settlements, we're going to call everyone together and resolve those issues so that we can actually enable the fast release of funding. So that is where we also try to provide relief. Then with regard to other issues raised, how much monies, how many applications did National Treasury approve, and how many applications did we turn down? To date, we've approved, there's nothing except for the ones that we received a day ago or two ago, where there's one or two requests that we're processing. Everything that we've received except one, we've approved. And we've approved within 1 or 2 days generally. And the only reason why it was not approved, it was a request by a public entity to give money to a conditional grant. And unfortunately, legally, it's not possible because the public entity money is not government money. So we had no option but not to approve it. All other things were approved. Then with regard to the insurance issues, as I've already pointed out, we're going to look at these issues and we're going to see what solutions we can get in this regard. And maybe the issue is much broader than just eThekwini, but we've been informed so far that it's largely an eThekwini issue. So we'll first target eThekwini. Evidently, in the other municipalities concerned in KZN, there is not an issue about insurance, but we'll, again, 100% make sure that that is the issue. Then a question was asked, which bill are we referring to, as the appropriation bill has already been processed through Parliament. That is actually 100% correct. The bill is currently with the President. It only becomes enacted after the President has assented to that, so we're waiting for the President to assent to the bill. So I was referring to that bill, not a special appropriation bill. Gina de Bruin can possibly also just indicate how a special appropriation will fit in, if necessary, when she gives the longer-term response. Then with regard to what will we do if the damages, there's a 1 billion rand available for immediate disaster relief funds. What will we do if that is not sufficient? There is the appropriation contingency reserve money that we can actually look at to add money for that purpose. Okay. Okay, then with regard to the issue about the Tongard issue and the potential tender issue, I'll refer that maybe if the member can give me more information in that regard, what I'll do in this regard is to refer it to the Office of the Chief Procurement Officer in National Treasury to look at. And then, okay, then with regard to the procurement issue that's also raised, each province, each municipality, each national department does procurement in its own right, and that includes emergency procurement as well. So there should not be hold-ups with regard to securing approvals, even for emergency procurement, because those processes are fast-tracked. Can I then hand over to Julia de Bruin?
Good afternoon, honourable members. My name is Julia de Bruin from the National Treasury. I work in the Public Finance Division. I will take a few of the questions. So on the long-term funding, if let's just assume it's 25 billion. As Wendy has indicated, some of it will come from the contingency reserve, which is 5 billion, and that we will take through a process that is called the unforeseeable and unavoidable expenditure. That's a process that Parliament is familiar with. It gets done every year precisely for these kinds of events. The honourable member is correct. 5 billion rand in the contingency reserve is not a large enough amount, but that is what it is given the fiscal constraints. And maybe this is a place where Cabinet should have a discussion around whether, in terms of that more disasters might occur, that amount should then be larger. Yeah. So there's that unforeseeable and unavoidable. Once the President signs the Appropriation Act into law, because Wendy would have explained, you saw that only 45% of the budget can be spent up until the Act is approved. So once the Act is approved, then the full amount becomes available, and all the national departments with conditional grants that are in the space for the disasters can then reorganize, bring forward money, so forth and so on. So that's another place where money can come from. But the bigger part of the 25 billion, if we take that as the amount, will come through the budget process, which starts now. I think KZN will remember that the disaster in 2019 in the school sector, KZN only received money in this financial year to fix those schools. And part of it is the verification, the clear costing, and so forth. And it is the timing. So, for example, for the unforeseeable and unavoidable, the applications for that have to be in by mid-August. So if you're not ready at that time, then you fall into the budget process. So that is how the longer term will be dealt with. The longer term will also be dealt with in the budget process more on how to do more disaster prevention on those aspects. And I think that is where the national departments who are mainly in the infrastructure sections will be thinking about how best can money then be requested or reorganized to do more on the prevention side. Then there was a question about the Solidarity Fund. We would have to ask the Solidarity Fund how much funding they've received and what they've spent it on, because they're not a PFMA institution. They're not an MFMA institution, so we have no sight over what has come into that fund. So we could ask them and give the committee a report back. Then on the donations, this is too an issue. The Treasury only has oversight over funds that flow via the RDP fund for donations. So that's what we can see. And so far, nothing has come there. We've understood that the conditions are set by the donor that is giving the money, and they will either give it directly to an NGO, like the Gift of the Givers or the Red Cross. And then each department can accept donations, and they have to list that then in their financial statements, who it was from, and then how they spent it. So it doesn't reflect in the National Treasury, it reflects in Human Settlements or the Provincial Department of Education, wherever the donation has come through. And then the honourable member wanted us to just explain section 56.2. It is not a contradiction that we say where the disaster has occurred, if it's in a municipality, it's for the municipality to bear the costs. What that just means is if the asset is registered as a municipal asset, the municipality must then fix it. The money can be transferred to the municipality from the province or from national to fix it. Because otherwise you will then be having a situation where somebody else is fixing an asset that does not belong to them, and that doesn't work within the rules of the game. So there's no contradiction in that statement there. And I think that's all for us. And then the other questions, honorable members, really do relate to the National Department of Human Settlements, the National Department of Cooperative, and some of it for the National Disaster Management Center. And so we hope that they will answer. Thank you.
Honourable Minister, I will request you now, you know, the more officials explain, the more questions arise. That's the problem. But we let us stick to our agreement. You can sum up this, but this is not the last interaction that we are going to have. But over to you, Honourable Minister.
Thank you. I think I do agree. Maybe up front, Honourable Chair, Honourable Members, I think what we cannot ignore is the concern expressed by members on the situation of people who are affected by disaster. And two, the fact that we can do better, all of us, whatever department that is involved. For instance, one of the members spoke about M&E. Up front, I suspect that in our area there could have been weaknesses, because some of the concerns that I expressed here, some of them were supposed to have been expressed by us in the M&E. Up front, even before going to the details, one sees that as a cap. Now, so that not to take a lot of time, I'm just saying this. The challenge, honourable members, we have, Ms. Fano has explained the procedures, that it takes not more than 3 days to actually deal with what we call with application. She has explained the processes that precedes that what we call that decision. And all those processes are not up to Treasury. But we accept the point that says, Treasury yourself, if these things don't happen, can you go there and give a technical support? You know, the best way, this is my proposal, Honourable Chair, to deal with this matter. To generalize it, it's not going to help, because we as ministers can't intervene and deal with those who are not doing their work. If we can be given a specific application, right, that this application got to Treasury, application A, it stayed for a month. Because the problem we have now, members are concerned that work is not happening on the ground, and the assumption is that Treasury is not releasing the money. If that is true, we need to deal with specific matters so the responsible officials can bear the consequences.
No, honourable members, allow the minister to continue.
I think Julie has explained the issue of municipality being responsible for the asset it owns. It starts there, and when you don't have capacity to deal with what is an emergency, there are also mechanisms to to deal with that. And lastly, I just want to say, my understanding is that this government, in terms of making resources available, law allows adaptation given the nature of crisis. And lastly, that there will always be procedures to actually approve monies. Thanks.
No, Minister, I think the committee agree that there must be procedures in place. However, when you declare national disaster and you don't have the systems in place, that poses a problem of its own. The PFMA, honourable members, the PFMA and the MFMA are very important mechanisms. However, when you deal with a national disaster, the PFMA and MFMA place burden in terms of response to the people who are in need, because it's not a planned event that has taken place. So that is an area that will require further interrogation, and this committee will make certain recommendations as far as that is concerned. Honorable Nyambi?
Thanks. Maybe it will be in order to raise it now, Minister Ngungubele, before you can leave, so that you understand the context. What necessitated this meeting? It's because when we happened to have a meeting with Minister of Finance, he created an impression that we have got provinces and municipalities that are not submitting the necessary documents. They can't fill the forms. Then as a committee, we felt that it will be in order for us to have all relevant stakeholders. That is why we decided to invite all the premiers, relevant MECs from the provinces. And that created a problem. And it was even a nightmare when we had to deal with it because of that problem. And Honorable Hlengwa is correct to say probably moving forward, it will really assist, because our meeting with you in your capacity as Minister dealing with monitoring and evaluation was in order in terms of giving us a sense of what we are doing, and the Minister of Cooperative assisted us in that presentation. But Minister of Finance, you'll remember, on that day, he was not part of that meeting. Then when we went to Eastern Cape, we happened to have a virtual meeting with the minister, and that created a problem. So our meeting today, over and above dealing with the reality of what we got on the ground, is to come out with something that will assist us to come with a preliminary report. But now, that is why Premier of KZN even touched the issue of we have to have a letter that will clarify the unintended consequence that was created by Minister of Finance statement in our first interaction. And I thought part of the people that are assisting you were part of that meeting, because there was somebody that was doing the presentation with the minister, and that created some serious gaps and problems in terms of the issue of coordination. But be that as it may, I think at an appropriate time, before we can have our session where we'll come with a consolidated report as this ad hoc committee, it will be in order to have you in your official capacity and the Minister of Finance to in his own capacity as the Minister of Finance, so that we can clarify some of the issues, because once they are explaining, it's raising more questions than answers. And that is why there's this rambling. So I thought it was going to be in order to have the context, what brought us in this situation. And now, some of these the questions then, to date, has not yet been clarified, because an impression about the role of municipalities. And the advantage with us is that we have been to almost all these areas. We understand better now what we're talking about. And we got a sense, that is why Honorable Manglu is 100% correct. The provincial premiers and the MECs were leading from the front, except, of course, the challenge of eThekwini. But all of them, without exception, they were part of our engagement, and they clarified us, and we got a sense that we've got an efficient, effective, committed team at provincial and local government level, but there's a problem somewhere at national level. So I think at an appropriate time, colleagues, that's the issue that we have to deal with. But now, after the break of the 10 minutes, we come back and deal with all the other presentation, except finance, because with finance, not unless, Honorable Hlengwa.
No, Chair, I'm sorry, I'm fully in agreement with what you are saying about having to meet Treasury, and thank you for your indulgence. Just one request, Chair, because I think at the heart of everything that you have correctly summarized for us as a committee is the issue of applications. If now Treasury says they've approved everything except for one, that's a very general statement. We need the specifics. Why? One municipality made an application for 44 million rands. They were approved for 28 million. So unless Treasury takes us on board and to confidence about the detailed nuances of these applications, the problem won't be resolved. So I'm not sure the departure of the minister means the officials are leaving, or who remains. Because at the heart of all of this is the flow of the money. And I can tell you, Chair, now, the reaction of the Premier of KZN to that presentation told me everything I needed to know, that they are speaking from two different hymn sheets. Because the Premier is questioning what is being presented. He's not party to it, he's not aligning to it, he's got questions. Yet these are the people who must be responding as a team to the disaster. So I'm really not sure, Chair, whether Utreasure Ruhamba Wonke, what I think really, more workers, but all I'm asking for, Chair, is that detailed submission of the applications. Thanks, Chair.
No, it's only Minister Ngungubele that is released. The rest of the people are going to be part of the meeting till to the end. And when we have provinces making presentation, we expect even them to be part of that, because we want to have something that will assist us when we are coming with that preliminary report to be in line with what has been discovered on the ground. Before Honorable Ngungubele, it will be in order to allow the premiers if there's anything, because we can't talk about you when you are here and misrepresent you. Honorable Zigalala.
No, thanks. I think we will take up issues with the officials as raised through you. But not only are we concerned about the compliance and regulations, but it's quick response from Treasury. That's one. Secondly, is to make statements that create expectations that would not be met. And I think, Minister, slide number 11 is also creating a problem, because you are saying there are donations that have been given. We are asking about those donations, there is nothing. You say international donations are progressing very slowly, yet there is none that you are presenting. Now you continue to create a wrong impression in the society, to say there are donations that have been given, and then we will be portrayed as people who are not accounting for that. And I think those things must be rectified, because they create a bad impression. Thanks.
Honorable MEC.
Thank you, Honorable Chair, co-chairpersons, and good afternoon to honorable members, honorable ministers and deputy ministers, the officials. Just to make 2 points. One point is to share the sentiments by honorable members that the system or National Treasury is not as agile as expected when dealing with the state of disaster. And I sometimes make an example when we visit certain incidents, that you would find a truck of gift of the givers immediately. And I've been always saying that people have not elected gift of the givers. We as government must respond, of course, within this regulated environment, not like more an NGO, we are government. We might not be as agile as them, but the sense of flat-footedness is not helping the situation. We're quite very flat-footed. And the other point is that National Treasury would help us as provinces if they were to be more clearer in terms of their difficulties. You can't be general about applications or information that is lacking, making it difficult to process information. You don't know as Eastern Cape, where is that difficulty? Whereas if you're not even telling where you're succeeding, that we're succeeding in these areas, here's the difficulties. We have supported these municipalities, here's a problem. So we don't know where to get. So there is lack of clarity on their part of what is happening on the ground. At the same time, they're not helping us so that we can work together to resolve those challenges. So I share the sentiments by the committee. That's a view we're holding as the Eastern Cape as well.
Thank you. Premier Mape. The roving mic to the Premier.
Thank you, co-chairs. Good morning, honorable ministers, deputy ministers, honorable members of the committee, my colleagues, the premier, and the MECs and the officials. I've been instructed to stand up. I think what really confused us was the emphasis from certain departments that we have to reprioritize. For us, that was a serious problem. And we ended up thinking if we have to reprioritize, then it means we don't have to apply anywhere because we are put under pressure that reprioritize. And the point that was made here that we may submit the application and it will take some time. We may even get the money after 2 years. It's not encouraging. It's not really encouraging because of the processes and the procedures. And I think that is the fulcrum of the argument of the committee, that we don't respond as if this is an emergency. We are not saying, no, procedures must be ignored, but we are saying this is a situation that requires us to move with speed, to do certain things. And so if you put pressure on us to reprioritize, as members of the committee indicated, then we'll go to health, then we'll go to education, then we'll go to social development, and then we'll be creating different sets of problems for our people and for our communities. So I think these are the issues that we think the Honorable Minister should give attention to. I always say that these things, we do not have ready-made answers. And so we are not really saying to the Minister that there are quick answers. We think they must go and think carefully about these things, and we should work together. And like the committee has done, if you interact with us at the provincial level, then you'll start appreciating the type of problems we face there. Fortunately, our situation is not as difficult as the situation in KwaZulu-Natal, because with us is mainly a village, and we can't start housing construction because there are still disagreements about whether people should be resettled or not. So, other things we want to fix, like water, sanitation, that, and so on. But major, projects will come later. And so we're hoping that by that time, all these difficulties will have been resolved. Thank you.
Thank you, Premier. I'll afford Acting Minister Ngungubele his parting shots.
Maybe what one was supposed to have said up front, which I think the President has also said that. The thing is that we don't attend the same meeting at the same time. We've accepted that generally in this country we have to turn around our response to emergency. A lot of weaknesses have been exposed. Even the time it took to put together interim assessments, interim plans, and all those by world standards, we were behind. And I think it was important for one to have said that, because I think it has been remiss of me not to do that. So we have acknowledged that something has to be done. But having said that, what the Premier of KZN said about Donna, I think that will have to be explained. I think it's a fair point. Lastly, here is my point, Chair. I might appear to be obstinate. If Treasury says every time we receive application in 2 days, we approve it. They have said it here in this meeting. They have said it here. It's Treasury that says that. No one is representing Treasury. They said everyone, in 2 days we approve it. Someone must demonstrate that is not true. Thanks.
Let's agree that in your other capacity, Honorable Minister, where we'll have the matrix that will guide us when we'll have the consolidated presentation, it's going to assist us. Colleagues, let's have strictly comfort break, 10 minutes, have tea, and then come back.
We reconvene at 1:05.
No, lunch is going to be at 1:45. Now it's comfort break, tea, then we come back, but it's only...
No, it will be 2:00.
No, now we're breaking for strictly 10 minutes for tea.
We'll make the announcement on lunch.
Then we'll make announcement for lunch when we're back.
But we sent back because it wasn't correct.
Okay. So I think we need that matrix and then,
With regards to my issue,
what, yeah, I was about to say, what is the problem? I saw the pictures you sent.
the community is in uproar at the moment because they're not receiving services, houses, electricity. It's a historical thing. It's coming for quite some time. The current mayor doesn't want to engage